Good to go.
Okay. You'll see it come up in a second.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. And I'd like to call to order our council meeting for Tuesday, June the 16th. It's great to see everybody on our Zoom format. And yeah, it's going to be a good meeting, I think. It's been about a week since the Premier delivered details about a phase 2 opening of communities in the Middlesex London area, which of course includes Lucan Biddulph, was included in those communities that received the green light to move ahead. And this, of course, is because of all of the work that our residents and businesses have done adhering to the restrictions that have been imposed upon us. It was with great enthusiasm that Paul and I put out a video last week announcing the opening of the splash pad. And I believe it opened up yesterday. I would like to caution our residents, though, that as much as things are opening up, there are still guidelines and some restrictions in place. It's important to remember that more often than not, the Premier will make an announcement of openings or easing of restrictions, and then the guidelines are released. And these guidelines are often challenging for not only businesses, but also in our case, municipalities to maneuver through. These guidelines aren't one-page documents. Often they come, if you were to print them off, and they would look this thick. It often takes much work to get into the position of being able to say, we're open. And we're still working on plans to open safely for our residents and our employees, as all of our businesses are. Until we receive firm direction from the province and public health, we cannot be 100% sure as to how to move forward as we make planning for reopening. Please keep this in mind if some of us do not move as quickly as you may like. The theme of COVID-19 seems to be be kind. Let's hope that remains the theme for us in our daily life as we work through this. COVID has brought out a lot of good, and I would like to take a moment to recognize some of the good deeds in our community. First of all, I want to recognize Dr. Chris Cameron. He's, of course, our local chiropractor. He's taken a keen interest in the small businesses throughout the Lucan Biddulph community. He's highlighted everything from restaurants to estheticians to even our own Discover Lucan Biddulph. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago when he said it took the pandemic for him to realize all that Lucan Biddulph had to offer. So I want to say thanks to Dr. Chris for supporting and encouraging the support of keeping it local. I also want to recognize Melissa Rinn and Jana Bear Smith. They, of course, would be familiar names to a number of us, and they have been a part of many community initiatives throughout the years. Most recently, they have headed the Lucan Assassins of Kindness, and it's a group that has honored and celebrated graduates in the Lucan Biddulph community. And it's been no small feat in trying to pull off this sort of recognition. There are many good news stories out there. And if you know of one, I encourage you to celebrate it. Thanks to all who make Lucan Biddulph a better place every day. And with that, we'll get the meeting going. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Councillor Mastarakis.
Yes, 4A and B. I'm a property owner adjacent to the property and the subject property, and we were the previous owners of the subject property.
Okay, thank you very much. And we did receive your form, so that has been looked after. I do need a motion. We don't have an in-camera session, but I do need a motion to move from our regular meeting to sit as the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act. Can I get a mover and seconder for that?
I'll move that.
Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman as seconder. All in favor, or all opposed, sorry, all opposed. And that is carried. Thank you very much. So before we get into the reports, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping with regards to the process that this planning meeting will take for not only council and staff, but for our registered attendees in the meeting, and of course, those watching us via YouTube. What will happen is our planner, Dan Fitzgerald, will deliver his report. This will be for both parts of the meeting. It basically follows the same procedure. So Dan will give his report. At that time, we'll ask if there's been any submissions received. The applicant will be asked to speak and deliver any comment if he or she wishes to. It'll be opened up to council for discussion, comments, question, and then we will open it up to the public for comments. And of course, those comments will be directed through me, the chair. And to make those comments for the attendees, there is a Q&A feature in the Zoom format. If you're on a laptop, it's at the bottom. If you're on an iPad, it's up top. We are asking you to use that to let us know that you have a comment to be made. Your name will appear, obviously, in the comment section, and you'll be put into the queue. You can indicate in that whether or not you are comfortable with it just being read or whether you want to make that comment yourself. Regardless, you will be given opportunity to respond or follow up appropriately. I want to make it clear that any of the attendees who make public comment will have the opportunity to speak, even though we are in this Zoom format. And of course, that will all be part of the minutes and the public record. That's basically the procedure from there, and then whether or not a motion comes out of it will follow the discussion. And as I say, we will remind you of the procedure as we go through this. We appreciate everybody's patience. We know that these are important discussions for our community to have, and the only thing I ask is that when you are presenting, that you be respectful of all those that are participating in this public forum. And with that, I will turn it over to our planner, Dan Fitzgerald, to walk us through the consent application.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, did you want to introduce the item first before?
Oh, you can. It is PL-05-2020 consent and zoning bylaw application with regards to 318 Beach Street, and it's B6789-2020 and ZBA-5-2020.
Through the chair. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. And maybe just for the benefit of everyone watching, my name is Dan Fitzgerald and I'm a planner for the County of Middlesex. I'm just going to share my screen so that everyone can see a subject location map of the properties that we're discussing here with this application. So this application before the committee today is with respect to 318 Beach Street, which is a consent to sever an existing residential lot into 3 separate lots for the purpose of construction of 3 townhouse units, as well as sever a portion of the land to consolidate with the property at 322 Beach Street. The applicant is also proposing to establish an access and maintenance easement for the purpose of providing access to the middle townhouse unit so that they can do maintenance at the rear of the property. Additionally, the applicant is also seeking to rezone the property to a site-specific residential third density exception zone, R3-10, which limits the development potential of the lands to an area outside of the floodway and accommodates the potential to sever the lands into individually owned townhouse units. The applicant also seeks to rezone the remnant parcel of land to be consolidated with an existing residential lot. The subject property is a 2,532.8 square meter or 0.63 of an acre parcel situated on the north side of Kent Avenue. North of Kent Avenue and south of Wilberforce Elementary School, as well on the east side of Beach Street in Lucan. The surrounding area is predominantly residential development in the forms of primarily single detached residential dwellings. However, there are also duplex dwellings and an apartment building. The property is currently a vacant parcel of land and formerly contained a fourplex. The entirety of the property is within the urban settlement area of Lucan, is designated settlement area in the county official plan, and is designated residential in the township official plan. Property is also identified as hazard lands in the township official plan. As confirmed by the AuSable Bayfield Conservation Authority, the subject lands are regulated as a floodplain. More specifically, the front portion of lands are within the flood fringe and the rear portion of lands are within the floodway. The property is zoned a site-specific residential third density exception zone, or R31, and municipal services exist on Beach Street, where access to the property is also maintained. The applicant's request consent to sever considers establishing 3 lots with frontages of approximately 8.5 meters or 28 feet for the proposed parcels abutting the neighboring properties on both sides, and 6.6 meters for the parcel in the middle as detailed in the planning report. The remnant parcel is proposed to be consolidated with the existing property at 322 Beach Street. The applicant, as noted, is also seeking consent to establish an access easement for the purposes of maintenance in favor of the middle lot. The applicant is also proposing to rezone a portion of land from site-specific residential third density exception R31 zone to a site-specific residential third density exception R310 zone, as mentioned, for the portion of lands proposed to contain residential dwelling units to recognize a reduction in the minimum lot area, frontage, setbacks, and interior side yard setback provisions. Also to limit the number of residential dwellings to 1 per lot, and to prohibit the establishment of accessory buildings or structures in the rear yard due to the existence of the floodplain. Details regarding the applicant proposed site-specific provisions can be found in the planning report. The applicant has also proposed to rezone the lands to be consolidated into the existing residential lot at 322 Beach Street from a site-specific residential third density R31 zone to the residential second density zone to recognize the existing zoning of the consolidated lands. A provincial policy statement, county official plan, and local official plan generally permit lot creation and promote infill and intensification to achieve growth objectives within the existing settlement boundaries where appropriate. The subject lands are municipally serviced and abut an existing municipal road, meaning an extension of the services and roads would not be required. This type of development is the preferred form as it promotes a more efficient use of land and infrastructure while reducing the need for an expansion of settlement area boundaries. Sorry, I'm just gonna, did I actually share my screen?
No,
Okay, my apologies.
no worries.
There we go. Just noticed that. The proposal is considered to meet the intent of the township official plan, as the development will increase the variety of more affordable housing options within the settlement area of Lucan. As noted in the planning report, the subject lands are located within a floodplain regulated by the AuSable Bayfield Conservation Authority. As is stated in the provincial policy statement and reflected in the local official plan, development generally should be located outside of areas identified as containing a flood potential. However, provisions in the PPS and township official plan and bylaw provide opportunities for development as long as said development is located within the flood fringe. Planning staff, in consultation with the Conservation Authority, have confirmed that the proposed area of development is fully contained within the flood fringe on the subject lands. The proposed site-specific zoning bylaw amendment is an integral part of this application as a whole. as it limits the ability of the developer to construct development beyond the lands deemed appropriate for development by the Conservation Authority. Bylaw provide opportunities for the requested reduction in front yard setback achieves a consistent street edge with the neighboring developments and further allows for the buildings to shift forward outside of the floodway. The reduced interior side yard setbacks on the north from 3 meters to 1.9 is deemed appropriate as the individual units provide parking and a driveway in the front and garage on the front, so access to the back via vehicles is not required. Also, the increased rear yard setback of 54 meters locks in the footprint of any future development so as not to be impacted by the floodway. Finally, the addition of a clause to restrict development of accessory buildings and structures within the rear yard is appropriate as requested by the Conservation Authority to remove any development potential in the lands that could be susceptible to flooding. Notice of the application was circulated to agencies as well as property owners in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. No concerns were received prior to writing of the report. With that said, planning and administrative staff did receive comments following the submission of the planning report, which have been shared with council in advance of the meeting. Staff also received comments from various agencies and departments during the circulation, as the planning report notes. I'm just going to note the Asawal Bayfield Conservation Authority did provide the following recommendation. The authority has been in pre-consultation with the property owners as well as the municipality. It is understood that development is reducing the number of dwelling units from 4 to 3. The ABCA does not support the severance of properties in regulated areas. However, it has been concluded that through careful consultation and permitting requirements of this authority, any concerns will be addressed through permitting approvals. Given the above, planning staff recommend the following: that application consent B-6/2020, B-7/2020, B-8/2020, and B-9/2020, filed by Adam Finch on behalf of Adam Finch and Jason Simpson, to sever 4 lots, of which one would have a frontage of approximately 8.55 meters or 28 feet along Beach Street in an area of approximately 932.1 square meters or 0.23 of an acre. The second, a frontage of approximately 6.6 meters and 1.9 feet along Beach Street, an area of approximately 512.6 square meters or 0.212 of an acre. The third, a frontage of approximately 8.54 meters or 28 feet along Beach Street, an area of approximately 807.5 square meters or 0.19 of an acre. And the fourth, to be consolidated with the abutting property at Lot 4, Part 1 of Registered Plan 33R14060, municipally known as 322 Beach Street, with a width to match the existing frontage of approximately 10 meters or 32.8 feet, and an area of approximately 278.8 square meters or 0.06 of an acre, and establish a 1.5 meter access easement along the south boundary of the property into the middle severed property from a property legally described as Park Lot 4, Plan 220, being Part 3, Plan 33R-14060 in the Township of Lucan Biddulph in the County of Middlesex be granted, and be granted subject to the conditions as outlined in the planning report. I just wanted to highlight a few conditions that we did include, which are a bit of unique conditions for this particular instance. Condition number 2 will require that the developer enter into a development agreement, and that's really to ensure that the building envelope and footprint sits as shown on plans. As well, that the lands be conveyed for the purposes of establishing townhouse units, be rezoned to a site-specific residential third density exception zone to recognize the reduction in the minimum lot area, frontage, setbacks, interior side yard setback provisions, to limit the number of residential units to 3 across the entirety of the property, and to be to limit the number, and to prohibit the establishment of accessory buildings or structures in the rear yard due to the existence of the floodplain. As well, condition number 4, that the lands be conveyed and consolidated with Lot 4, Part 1 of Registered Plan 33R14060, municipally known as 322 Beach Street, also be rezoned to residential second density zoning, which is consistent with the existing parcel. Also, condition number 7, that the applicant is required to pay $3,000 cash in lieu of parkland dedication to the township, which is $1,000 per residential lot severed. And condition number 11, that the applicant be required to obtain a permit from the AuSable Bayfield Conservation Authority for the proposed development. And the reasons for that is that it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conformity with the county official plan, is maintained in conformity with the local township official plan is also achieved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dan. I believe that the applicant is an attendee, and I didn't know if at this time he had anything to add further to the report. Tina, did you have-
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that written comments were
Oh,
received.
right, sorry, yeah.
That's okay. From Dan did mention in his report that they were forwarded on to council for information and consideration, but written comments were received from Ian Bell and Tim and Ashley Hagan.
All right, thanks for that, Tina. And once again, I'll just say I know that the applicant is a attendee, and I don't see indication that he wanted to speak, but I will wait a second to see if he's got anything to add before I open it up for comment from council. Okay, yes, Ron.
Madam Mayor, sorry to interrupt you there. There might have been a few people that came on after you went through the sort of order of operations. So I just want to maybe reiterate the fact that if people want to ask a question or want to speak, please use the Q&A function down at the bottom and let me know that you want to speak, and I can then bring you into the meeting to speak. So Adam, I know you're there. If you would like to speak, use the Q&A function, let me know, and I can unmute you and let you in. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Ron. Okay, comments, questions, discussion from the committee. Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dan, I was just if I can ask a question of Dan, just for condition number 7 about the cash in lieu of parkland. So I'm looking at the map. Was that land going to be designated for trails or anything like that? I'm just wondering why there's that dedication is there.
Through the chair to Councillor Reagan, the parkland dedication is a fee in the Lucan-Biddulph or the Township of Lucan-Biddulph fee schedule for planning applications. It basically just says that whenever additional residential lots are created, that the fee payable to the township is $1,000 in lieu of parkland dedication.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks. Just an information. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council at this time? Deputy Mayor, Dave.
Just wondering, the applicant, I'm sure he reached out to the neighbors. It's just, there's not a lot of straight lot lines at the back. I've lived in Lucan when that's been the case, where people own the property behind, and it's all fun in the initial ownership, but sometimes over years, it's always nicer to have straight lines. Is your intent at the build of that to at least put the fencing up, or are you going to have each owner kind of up to them to decide where they put fencing up?
So that is a question for the applicant. Ron, can you unmute Adam?
Okay, Madam Mayor. Adam, can you hear us online there?
Is he the other is he that other number?
No, actually, it says his name on there, Adam Finch. So I've unmuted him. But Adam, if you can hear this, you should be able to speak. I don't know whether you're on what kind of device you're on, but you should be able to reply to that question. No, I'm sorry. I'm not. Okay, in lieu of that, what we can do, Adam, if you heard the question, if you could type out the question, because you did type something to me. So if you're able to type your answer in, I can read it out loud for the record. Madam Mayor, we also have one person who
Yeah.
would like to make a comment. So
Yeah.
whenever you're ready, just let me know.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so we'll wait to see if we can connect with the applicant. Deputy Mayor, did you have anything else? Dave, to ask to that?
No,
Um,
it's not important for the passing of it. It was just wondering. So, okay.
No, Dan, I just wondered about a couple things. The provision about sheds and outbuildings. So there will not be any allowable structure in the backyards. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. That was a specific requirement for the Conservation Authority
Mhm.
that no development be permitted in that back portion of the lands, which is considered floodway as opposed to flood fringe.
Okay. Yeah.
So that formulates, from their perspective, a very important feature of that proposed bylaw.
Okay. And then with regards to parcel 4, so essentially it abuts 322 Beach Street, and they will, through this, they'll merge together. Like how is that done? Or,
Through the chair, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. So through the process, parcel 4 effectively becomes the remnant parcel of land for the original lands. They would then transfer that land through consolidation of title to the existing owner at 322 Beach Street. Basically, it's a legal transaction once this, if the severance is approved. And then the zoning request is to change that to an R2 zone, which reflects the existing zoning of 322 Beach Street. So it's just a consolidation of the existing zoning on that lands.
okay. Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Ron?
I think Adam is going to be okay here now. So Adam, can you hear us?
I can hear you. You got me
Okay.
there?
Okay, very good. So maybe we can get the deputy mayor to re-ask his question, and maybe you can answer his question.
I was just wondering, there's just the lot lines. It's always nicer, obviously, to have straight lot lines. I assume you talk to the neighboring properties about purchasing that from you. So my concern is, because I've lived in that situation, and that is fencing of all those backyards that are on different properties. Or is your plan to have each tenant take care of fencing, or will you be take care of fencing those properties?
That is something that I'd have to ask Asalvo Bayfield about. I'm not even sure a fence can go back through the floodplain. So I don't know how far a fence can go back from each individual unit. Each neighbor was approached about the purchase. Obviously, one wanted it. One had a previous deal, I guess, and that deal wasn't going to work for us. And the other one wasn't interested.
Okay, no, hopefully I can see not impeding any of the swales and obviously the flow of water and drainage and stuff, but hopefully it'd be nice if you are able to contain things within the property, but okay, understood, thanks.
Dan, did you have follow-up to that?
Yeah, through the chair, if I can, just quickly, I think Adam raised a good point. The Conservation Authority effectively doesn't want to see any type of development in the back of that property. So I'm not sure that they would allow the establishment of a fence in that area. Something that they would have to approve through a Section 28 permit. With that said, the request and the consent, as well as to establish that 1.5 meter access easement to the rear for proposed parcel number 2, which is the townhouse in the middle. In that instance, a fence would impede their access to that back area. So they wouldn't be able to establish it at least across that access way.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments from council? Okay, so at this time, I'm going to open up the discussion for the public. And as Ron said, we do have a question from Tim Hagan. So if you can unmute him, Ron.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. You guys hear?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, so this is Tim Hagan and Ashley Hagan, and we just wanted to state our issues with the proposal development. One thing I just found interesting listening here, there was never any conversation about how this will impact the neighborhood. It's about the conversation, the floodplains, the lots, but what does high density housing do to the neighborhood as far as like high density typically has a correlation with crime, drug use. There's already quite a bit of high density development already in this neighborhood. We moved here specifically to try and avoid high density development. And you guys seem to be on a path of, I guess, what Dan noted, preferred development, which is disappointing. And it's just people are coming to this town to raise families, and we're worried about the direction that you're marching towards. I'm curious to know if Dan lives in the immediate neighborhood and if he has his children here, and what the consequences of these developments will be in the next 20 years. Or are you guys just considering the tax base? That's my comment.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Hagan. I don't think that where the planner lives should be brought up in the discussion. And I'll just leave that comment at that. I think it should be noted that in that neighborhood, there's already apartment building, there are duplexes, there is this kind of density. So this would not be new density should this be approved by council. Were there any other comments that wanted to be made from the public? Ron, anybody?
I'm not, Madam Mayor, I'm not seeing anybody else requesting to speak on this particular application.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to put it back to the committee before we move into the public meeting forum. Is there any more other comments to be made from council? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I guess for myself, I just felt that the living in Lucan all my life, that's actually has been always a higher density than what's proposed. And with the surrounding areas, I never, I guess to his point, that's why for me, there wasn't much discussion on it. To me, it's anyone that's lived in that neighborhood, lived in Lucan in the past, that density has been there in the past. And I thought it was a good use, good way of putting that land back to use myself in an appropriate manner that with that surrounding area. But I guess, I certainly don't want to make it look like, that there's no thought or process or thinking that goes into that. That's all. So.
That. Any other comments from council? Okay, so with that, you do have a recommendation, and we would entertain either a motion to accept or to not accept the recommendation of the planner as per his report. I would just need a mover and seconder for that, one way or the other. Councillor Westman, are you moving acceptance or?
I move to accept the planner's report. A recommendation, rather.
The recommendation as per the report. And can I get a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor? Any further discussion on that? All opposed? And that's carried. So I just have to remind you that there is the decision of the committee that needs to be signed. So if those members of council can come in tomorrow and sign that. Dan, before we move into the public, well, I guess maybe the next step would, you can address the next steps with regards to appeal process and notifications, I guess, maybe coming out of the public meeting, probably that makes more sense. Okay, so I just need a motion to adjourn the Committee of Adjustments and to move into our public meeting. Councillor Reagan and Councillor Westman, all opposed, and that's carried. All right, so we're moving into the public meeting, and now we've got in front of us the zoning amendment application with regards to these parcels of land. And Dan, did you want to just highlight what this means exactly?
Through the chair, yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to go through the specific recommendation of what the zoning, what you're voting on in terms of zoning. But as previously stated, as I gave my our presentation there, the zoning is kind of the integral part of this consent. So just keep that in mind, because from the county's perspective, from planning's perspective, we would want to ensure that any development within the area is outside of the floodway. So, and that's what I mean in terms of being an integral part of that. And just maybe just for the public's benefit, prior to reading this, there is a 20-day appeal period for the consent as well as the zoning bylaw that will be sent out through the notice of decision. So anyone registered as a party who's that submitted comments or spoke as an interested stakeholder would have the opportunity to appeal a decision as well as the applicant as well. So with that said, I make the recommendation that application for zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 05/2020, which was filed by Adam Finch on behalf of Adam Finch and Jason Simpson for a property known legally as Park Lot 4, Plan 2020, being part of 3, Plan 33R-14060 in the township of Lucan Biddulph in the county of Middlesex to rezone a portion of the subject lands from a site-specific residential third density exception zone R3-1 to a site-specific residential third density exception R3-10 zone for the lands identified on Schedule A as R3-10 and rezone a portion of subject lands from a site-specific residential third density exception R3-1 zone to a residential second density R2 zone for those lands identified on Schedule A as R2 to bylaw number 2003-2020 be approved as the application satisfies the requirements of the Planning Act, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan of both the township of Lucan Biddulph and the county of Middlesex, and satisfies the requirements of the township of Lucan Biddulph zoning bylaw, and as well presents sound land use planning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. With regards to the zoning portion, I didn't know if the applicant had any comment to make. Seeing none, any comment from council? And again, I'll take this opportunity to open it up for comment from the public. Once again, reminding you to use the Q&A function. Okay, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to either accept or not accept the recommendation. Deputy Mayor? And
To accept. Yeah.
to accept. And a seconder, Councillor Regan. Any further discussion? And all opposed? And that is carried. Okay, so before we move on, can you just, Dan, you highlighted that there is an appeal process, but maybe just go through the timelines again and what will happen with notifications and all of that.
Through the chair, yes. Thanks, Madam Mayor. As noted, now a notice of decision will be sent out for the proposal. So anyone that has registered to speak to the item as a stakeholder would now have the opportunity to appeal a decision. The appeal rights are laid out in the notice that was sent out previously. If anyone has any questions, they can certainly contact me with regards to that, or the township office as well. Appeal rights are, sorry, I should say that, 20 days after the notice of appeal is sent out. So the notice of appeal will be sent out to anyone within the surrounding area or as an interested stakeholder, and it will identify the time frame for which an appeal must be received.
Great, thank you very much, Dan. And just again, reminder to council to come in and sign the recommendation. With that, we'll move on to the next one. Can somebody text Councillor Mastarakis to let him know to come in? Yeah, there he is, right there. Okay, with that, I will pass it back over to Dan to walk us through zoning amendment application with regards to part lot PL-06-2020, the zoning bylaw application, Richmond Street, Block 29, Plan 33M759, ZBA 6-20. And I will pass it over to you, Dan.
Through the chair, thank you, Madam Mayor. And for anyone watching who's joined us, just as a refresher, my name is Dan Fitzgerald, and I'm a planner with the County of Middlesex. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen this time, just to show people at home reference to the what we're referring to today. Okay, so as noted, this is the public meeting for an application received for the subject property at 33318 Richmond Street, which is in the Lucan Estates subdivision and north of Richmond Street. The subject property is approximately 2.66 acres or 1.08 hectares and is situated in the Lucan Estate subdivision north of Richmond Street with a frontage off of Old Clover Drive. Existing land uses surrounding the property include a single detached dwellings to the north, south, and west, and vacant land to the east. As such, the existing land use is predominantly residential in nature. The property is currently a vacant parcel of land. The entirety of the property is within the settlement area of Lucan and is designated residential in the township official plan. The property is zoned a site-specific residential third density exception holding zone, or R3-8-H, is serviced and is accessed off of Old Clover Drive. As noted in the planning report, the property was originally rezoned on January 5th of 2009 from a future residential zone to a residential third density holding zone, or R3-8. Following an unsuccessful zoning amendment in 2013, which was deferred, the zoning of the property was again amended in 2017 to a site-specific residential third exception zone, holding which is the R3-8-H zone that we see today. This exception zone permitted an increase in the height from 10 meters to 12 meters, while also establishing a frontage requirement of 6 meters from Old Clover Drive. The lands were sold, and a new owner is requesting an amendment to increase the height of the site-specific exception zone, as noted, from 12 meters to 17.5 meters, which is having the effect, as noted in the application, of being able to build a higher end building with 9-foot ceilings and 5 stories. The existing zoning on the property permits the following as displayed on the screen. As noted, the subject lands are currently zoned a site-specific residential third density exception holding zone, which would currently permit uses of apartment building, multi-unit dwelling, senior citizen housing, and townhouse dwellings. Also of note, minimum lot frontage would be 16 meters. Maximum lot coverage is 40%. Front yard depth requirement is 8 meters. Side yard width of an interior lot is 3 meters. And rear yard depth is 10 meters. And as mentioned, maximum height is 12 meters. That was part of the bylaw 2009-2017 as amended. And the minimum number of parking stalls on the site is 1.5 stalls per dwelling unit. And minimum outdoor amenity area is 35% of lot. And just as a note, no dwelling shall be erected, used, or altered unless such dwelling is connected to public water supply systems and public sanitary sewage systems, which are available on the land. Put that around for you. So as stated in the application received, it's the applicant's intent, if zoning is approved, to build a 5-story building on the property located in the area as shown on the screen. The property is designated settlement area in the county official plan and residential in the local official plan. The planning report identified a number of policies to consider from the provincial policy statement, county official plan, and the local official plan. Of the policies noted, I would like to generally note that all documents support the policy and direction that development would be focused within the boundaries of the settlement areas. They also speak to the appropriateness of development based on a mix of densities and housing types or options through the establishment of targets for affordable housing, that being 20% for Lucan and Biddulph. Policies also speak to the importance of a servicing hierarchy in that development generally should be located to maximize existing servicing, promoting an efficient use and optimization of existing municipal sewage services and municipal water services. More specifically, policies in the local official plan state that the scale, density, and form of new residential development shall respect and be sensitive to the small town character of the village. At the same time, it is recognized that multiple forms of residential development will provide the potential for more affordable housing, as well as housing more able to meet the increasingly diverse needs and preferences of the community. It goes on to state that to ensure compatibility with existing development, the density and height of new residential development shall be limited. Notice of the application has been circulated to agencies as well as property owners in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. Only one formal letter was received at the time of writing of the report. However, as noted, a number of written submissions have been received following the submission of the report, which have been shared with council in advance of the meeting. Generally, the concerns received are specific to the following themes. There's concerns regarding tenant occupied units as opposed to owners, concerns over the impacts of vehicular traffic and noise, concerns over the loss of privacy within the neighborhood, concerns over the negative impact potential to property values as stated, and impacts of shadows in the neighborhood. Planning staff also note that a number of comments were received in support of the proposal as depicted in the applicant's submission. Given the above, staff recommend that council receives the planning report as information, and I look forward to hearing from the public and applicant today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that report, Dan. So just to refresh the process, and I'm going to ask the applicant or the applicant's representative if he or she has any comments, then I will open it up to council for comment and discussion, and then it will be opened up to the public attendees for discussion. And a reminder to the attendees to use the Q&A function. And if you're on a laptop, it's at the bottom of the screen. If you're on an iPad, it's at the top. And to indicate that you have a comment to make, you can request that your comment be read, or you can make the comment yourself. But again, I want to be completely clear that you will have opportunity to speak and have that as part of the public record. So at this time, I will ask the applicant or his agent if he or she has anything to add.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michelle Dornbush. I'm with Brock Development Group, and I represent the property. He's actually to my left. He's available as well if there's any specific questions related to the property or ownership or the long-term operation of the building. Those questions can be answered as well. First of all, thank you, Dan, for the presentation. I think it does give a sufficient background in terms of what the existing zoning does permit on the property. I think that's one of the most important features of this property, is that everyone involved in this is aware of what the existing zoning can accommodate on the site. While we are looking for a zoning bylaw amendment to increase the building height, the reality of the existing zoning is that an apartment building up to 4 stories can currently be constructed on the property based on the current zoning conditions. Ron, are you able to share the image? So what I prepared yesterday, just for everyone's, just for visual purposes, I created a concept plan that actually takes into consideration the existing conditions, the existing zoning conditions as they are today. Ron, do you have the other plan?
Give me 1 second to find that. Just keep talking and I'll find it and bring it up.
The plan, I might as well speak to this plan, the landscape plan that's before you. So the features of the benefit of the requested increase in building height allows the footprint of the building to be substantially smaller. It allows for sufficient open space. You can see how much green space is located around the building. It allows for in excess of 30 meters, so over 100 feet on either side of the building. So when we're talking about small town character of the building, there's a number of ways that buildings can be looked at in terms of fitting in with the character of the existing area. Sometimes it's with regards to the scale of the building. Sometimes it's with regards to how that building transitions to the surrounding properties and things like that. We're getting close.
Is that the right one?
It's the right one. It's just upside down.
Oh, sorry. Trying to do too many things at once here.
That's okay.
Okay.
Perfect. So this is the plan that I had provided yesterday. And what this plan shows is it gives you an indication as to if we were to take the current zoning conditions and zoning regulations that are applicable and forego any sort of zoning application that would be subject to public input and to public meetings with and open it to the neighborhood and to the residents. This is the plan that what can be accommodated. It provides all of the required parking. The lot coverage is permitted up to 40% for this building, for this property. These 2 buildings itself are still well below that. They're only covering 20% of the property, as I said, whereas 40% is permitted. We've got, and again, these buildings are both 4 stories, and you can accommodate 4-story buildings within the current 12-meter building height. Now, it may not necessarily be the most aesthetically pleasing buildings because you cannot incorporate the architectural features when you don't have the additional building height for parapets rooftop amenities or different rooftop architectural features that you can incorporate into these buildings. But at the same time, the existing zoning does allow for this, and this would comply at 4 stories. They would be 8-foot ceilings, and again, a very simple style building, but still would meet the 12 meters. So as you can see, it would result in a lot more building coverage, a lot more parking, because of the 2 smaller buildings. Obviously the costs go up in terms of construction costs when you're talking about 2 separate buildings as to 1 individual building. And then with that, obviously is the loss of the green space around the site. But keeping in mind that the minimum landscaped open space is 35%, and the plan that you see before you accommodates 36%. So it is still in compliance with the current zoning regulations. So I think it's important for council to understand, without this application before you, without the request for the increase in building height, this is an application and this is a proposal that could come forward through the site plan approval process, which is done internally with staff. It does not offer the public any opportunity for opposition to this. Now, in some circumstances, obviously councils do allow for public site plan meetings, but at the end of the day, it's up to staff and council as to whether or not they would be supportive of this. But from a planning perspective and under the Planning Act, this meets those requirements. So subject to any other, stormwater management issues or something like that that may arise, from a planning perspective, there would be no reason why an application like this or a plan like this would be refused from a site plan perspective. So as an alternative to this, and if Ron, you can go back to the other plan, as an alternative to the 2 4-story buildings, we do feel that this is a far superior design for the site. It allows the 5th story, but in doing so, it allows the building to be located much farther, obviously much farther from the property lines. The current zoning actually allows a building up to 12 meters within 3 meters of property line. So it would be quite tight. Whereas I said, this building in front of you, we've got 38 meters on the one side and 35 meters on the other side. So that's definitely a circumstance. You don't see that in the city. And that's why I think, although this is a 5-story building, people may look at it as it not being appropriate in terms of the small scale character. But when you match it up with other features like the green space and the outdoor amenity space that we've been able to accommodate on this plan, you do bring that back down to a scale that is consistent with what you would find. And again, when you're talking about a transition in scale from a 5-story building to single detached dwellings that are beside you, you from a planning perspective, you have 2 options. You can slowly decrease the scale of the uses between the areas, or you can do what we've shown here and provide sufficient setbacks so that essentially you've got that open space, and the impacts of a larger building are much less when you can accommodate the larger setbacks like we've done here. And as well, we've centralized the parking in the middle of the site. In this particular instance, the building blocks the views of the parking from Richmond Street. So you're still maintaining that urban kind of streetscape that you would find through the small town area, although recognizing that this is still not a full urban cross section across Richmond Street, but it provides a building with frontage. There's main floor patios and balconies that would face the street. So in terms of the context of what we're dealing with for this property in particular, it definitely fits within that corridor that enters into the community as you approach kind of the urban area right in the downtown. With regards to precedent setting, I know that's always a concern that is raised by councillors when applications like this come forward. With this one in particular, the appropriateness of the use was already assessed through the draft plan of subdivision application process. So we're not necessarily speaking about whether or not the use is appropriate. As you're aware, that's already been determined well in 2017, that apartments uses, and as well even in 2009. So that's already been assessed. Traffic's been assessed. It was all a part of the subdivision application that was done previously. So at this point today, we really need to focus on what is at hand in the application is the increase in the building height from 12 meters to 17.5 meters appropriate in terms of the context of the surrounding area. And as well, in terms of precedent setting, all of that taken into consideration, there are very few properties that would be able to accommodate this scale of building on the size of the property and offer the amenity space and the setbacks that this building does. So it is very special circumstances. So from those perspectives, I would have a hard time, and I know it comes up a lot with municipal applications, but the reality is every application needs to come forward on its own merits, reviewed in the context of the surrounding area, and then looked at individually as to, does this fit? What are the impacts on the adjacent properties, and how can we mitigate those as best as possible? And I think in terms of this one, I think we've been able to do that. Although we are increasing the building height, it is resulting in a far superior design in terms of long-term impacts on surrounding properties and how we can mitigate that. And over time, the green space, in our view, is going to be a much greater benefit than scaling down the building to 4 stories or even 3 stories for that matter, and putting the buildings that much closer to the property lines. Because I think that's going to be, even a 3-story building at 3 meter setback is going to have far greater impacts than a 5-story buildings on a 38 meter setback. So I think that's something that we really hope that the councillors look at and take that into consideration when viewing this application and the merits of this application. I would be happy to answer any questions of council, and I would appreciate being given an opportunity to respond to any comments that may come forward from the public through this process as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Michelle. Before I forget, because I already did forget once, Tina, did we receive any written submissions?
Yes, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. Written submissions were received and forwarded on to council for information and consideration from the following: Jillian Bourne, Don Odekirk, George Boa, Kelsey Bates Hudson, Brian Kelly, Phyllis Uren, Marcus Johnston, Bobby Elliott Johnston, Chelsea and Stephen Connor, Taryn Pestoka, Stephen Carolyn Trustwell, Walter Parkinson, and Michael Jakes.
Okay, thanks for that, Tina. So I'm going to open it up to council. But again, just a reminder to the attendees, if you've got a question, if you could use the Q or comment, if you could use the Q&A format. And just a reminder that this is a public meeting and it is a public record. So we will require your name for the minutes. So if you've signed in under a phone number or something like that, when we go to deal with your comment, we will be asking your name because that is required as part of this public process. So with that being said, I will open it up to council for discussion, comment. Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for the planner, if I may.
Which one?
Dan, sorry, Dan.
Yep.
So I've read the submissions from residents, and I went over there today and looked around, and I've looking at the 2 pictures that we just saw. I saw those earlier, the 5-story apartment, the 51 units, and the green space, the garden, the amenity space, all of that sort of stuff that, you know, it looks great. Then I saw the other one, which had the 2 apartments on it, the one that we just saw, correct? So And that was kind of, so what I'm just wondering is hypothetically, if you have this 5-story apartment unit, the 51 units that are in that building, if I'm correct, like how do we protect ourselves from having another building put 10 feet from the property lines on Spencer? Like, can we do, is there anything we can do? Because I mean, that's what people were talking about is, you've got the apartment building right there, that lot was at 3 meters, and then the balcony, and you're looking right in somebody's backyard. So I can understand why they're doing that. I mean, who's to say down the road that somebody says, well, this is, great, and it's a nice 5-story building, and it's got the balcony or the patio, and then all of a sudden somebody decides, well, let's just we can put another one in there, because they can do that, right? I mean, that's what it's approved for. And how many units? I thought it was 80 units. I think somebody said we can have up to. So you could have this building, and then you could have another building. Is this right? And what's our recourse? So how do we protect? I mean, I'm just thinking about this, because what I'm hearing from residents, and that's what I'm listening to, is a small town feel, right? Is this part of what we want? And that 17 meters, that, that's high for us, I think. And I know we need these units. I know we need to provide affordable housing. That's not what I'm not saying we don't, but I'm just concerned that, we do this, we're gonna, does this set a precedent for it? Plus the fact that what stops anybody from just saying, hey, let's just put another building up and, reconfigure the parking lots. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor. So it's actually a really good question. It's one that I've been receiving from the public as well with regards to the proposal. The only limits in the existing zoning are basically, so maybe I'll jump back to the density question. So the number of units. The conceptual plan as shown, obviously site plan approval hasn't been, the process hasn't been gone through. So in terms of number of units, there's no actual cap on the site stating only this amount of density can be built based on current zoning provisions, as well as based on the owner's submission. So putting a hard cap on how many units can actually go on the land would be subject to meeting all of the zoning provisions of the bylaw. And what I mean by that is they have to basically meet all of the setback provisions first for the building, and then they would have to meet all the setback provisions for parking areas, and then they can only cover 40% of the lot with the building, and then they have to have X amount of parking stalls based on the number of units that they have, and then they have to maintain a minimum 35% outdoor amenity space. So when you take all of those things all together as one unit, that kind of maxes out how much development potential is on the land. So today in the bylaw, there's nothing that says you can only build X amount of units. It's more defined by how much can you fit on the land based on all the provisions that you have to meet in the zoning bylaw. So hopefully that provides clarification. Further to that, I would say, I've heard the comments, and I saw a comment come up here about, well, can you put another 5-story building on the site? So it would be dependent on the number of parking stalls, the outdoor amenity space, those setback provisions, all those factors as to whether or not they could actually physically fit another building on the property. So it would be hard to just come out and judge and say, no, they can't do it, or yes, they can do it. Certainly there's nothing in the bylaw that would physically limit them based on the proposal. Maybe that's something that council would want to address further.
May we have a follow-up?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So back to Dan again. So it's just my concern is that if I'm a resident, this is just me, I'm a resident, so I'm going, okay, well, there's going to be an apartment building anyway. This looks great. It's all wonderful. The other map, you show the other drawing, you show it. I don't like that so much. And then all of it, like I said, and then all of a sudden, surprise, so like, again, I'm not sure if maybe you answered it, but I'm just wondering, how does the community protect themselves against that? When I say protect, I mean, is there if they follow, so what you're saying basically is that if all the bylaws are followed, then another building could another 5-story go in there if they meet all those bylaws? So I'm just, right in behind Spencer there.
through the chair, the councillor, if they, yeah, so basically speaking, if they were able to meet the provisions of zoning, there's nothing that would limit them from putting another building on the lands based on the current zoning provisions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Any other comments, a discussion from council? Councillor Westman.
Okay, so the 51 unit proposal, is there any way to lock the applicant into the location of the building? So currently the picture shows the building being at the very front of the property parcel. So that obviously would keep it away from the residential houses along the back. So is there any way to be site specific and lock that building into its location?
Dan?
Through the mayor, I'm assuming that's to me.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, that's another great question. Based on the current zoning provisions, there would be nothing that, again, limits them to placing a building on the exact footprint as shown on the conceptual plan. The only, or I would say the best way to do so from a pure planning perspective would be to limit that through a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for a site-specific provisions that states, you know, you have to have a minimum interior side yard setback from the north of this amount, from the south of this amount, from the east and west. So that basically locks in the footprint of the building as to, you know, it has to be placed exactly here on the lot. Then you can add provisions if there's concerns of additional units being added. It would, you know, maximum density is this many units per hectare. Maximum story is, as requested, would be 5 based on their conceptual plan. So there are ways to lock in the proposal based on zoning, site-specific zoning provisions that could be considered through a bylaw amendment.
Follow up, Councillor Westman.
Yeah, so I mean, I read some of the submissions, and that seems to me one way to mitigate some of the concerns. You know, the vantage or viewpoint from the higher stories, being able to see into backyards and what have you. The angle of approach would be different if the further away it is from the residential property lines. Also, any issues about casting shadows. I mean, the orientation of the property makes it pretty much impossible to cast a shadow onto the residential properties because the sun doesn't work that way. It has, you know, rises in the east, sets in the west, that sort of thing. But I think it would certainly mitigate some of those concerns and make the rest of the property a little less useful for further development down the road, I would think, anyway.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that was just more a comment, Alex. Michelle, did you have anything that you wanted to add in at this point?
Yes, thank you, Madam Worship. I just wanted to touch on both of these comments. I have spoken to Dan about this. We do not, the owners of the property do not have any intention to build any future buildings on this property other than the one 5-story building. So we absolutely are open to, as part of the rezoning for the height increase, we are open to putting some sort of zoning regulation in place that would limit any future buildings on the property, in a sense that if anybody, you know, if change hands or, you know, things change down the road, the only way that somebody could ever put another building on here would be if they went through an approval process before council once again.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments, discussion from council? I think I saw the deputy mayor's hand up.
Yeah, I got a couple of things. I've heard a couple, Dan and Daniel actually comment on affordability. But I don't like hearing that word, because those are some comments that would like to be seen in our community. And this is market rate. There is no geared to income. There is no percentage of renters there with a discounted rate or anything like that. So the concerns of our community on this is not this is not being met. I guess, this is an optional way of living, but it's not, this is market rate. So unless anyone wants to correct that, but that's just when I hear this affordable, it's a feel-good word, and it's not the correct word, I find. It's optional. The other thing is, at the end of the day, once we open this up to that height, we can't hold the applicant to intent. Basically, at the end of the day, if the numbers came in on a quote and the applicant either want to sell the property at 17.5 meters and not develop it, or if he had a change of his intent and go to just regular height ceilings, flat rooftop, it would become a 6-story. We can't control intent. So I do want to caution the residents and our council of that. Also, to change it to only, the property is certainly available for a second unit. I think it would be hard to hold up in an OMB fight if there was a second property proposed on it. I do think the developer would win. So that's nice that the intent would be followed on this. But again, the comments coming from the neighborhood saying, we only want one apartment building, we only want one. I can assure you, it would be a tough fight at an OMB hearing, I think, if they decided, or another developer decided to put a second one there. So just be aware of that. Also, too, the 17.5 meters, my biggest struggle is that it's not site specific, it's defendable. Like that there, we would reshape our community at that height. It's funny, I don't mind actually the drawing, I don't mind maybe the site specific, but that opens us up. We're about to do there's a lot of property that will be converting over from farmland to future residential. We already got another application coming to us in the future. There's 2 more 3 stories that are about to go up beside our township office. Could look at this as I think as an opportunity to go higher without being defendable, very easily defendable by our community. So to me, the height is reshaping our community, and it's a concern of mine. So that's all I have for comments for right now.
Okay. I'm just making some notes, sorry. Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Mastarakis.
That's a bit of a similar theme, Madam Worship, to Deputy Manders. What's the goal of our municipality for intensification? That's the theme, that's the direction, but to what degree we go on intensification. And Dan and Dirk may know better. I understood that, for example, the state of Oregon is putting in a bylaw that any municipality over 10,000 residents will not have a single family home going in. It has to be multi-unit for moving to intensification. So even if we pass some zoning restrictions today, if intensification comes in 10 years from now and it goes to OMB, it may change what's been put in place, similar to other discussions about frontage, heights, and everything else. So where do we want to go as a municipality on intensification? I like the proposal. I like the move to, one building. If it stays one building, the look is better. They've done a great job of talking to residents, and we're getting comments from both sides, and that's, the passion is good in the community. They've done a great job in Clandeboye, the work they've done there, from what I understand, in those apartments. So they've got a good track record, a lot of positives. My question is the longer term goal of our municipality in intensification. What does this 17.5 do? And then a week from now, will somebody come and ask for 20 meters? Because that's a much smaller jump up than the 5.5 we've just gone forward to.
Okay, so again, I think that's more of a comment at this point, but maybe to jump off of that for Dan, I guess, well, a couple things, and maybe this is a good opportunity to just quickly jump in. We talk about, what is it that we want for our community? What will this set, in making this decision? Should it be approved? What does this mean for our community? Ron, can you just quickly, because I think you're going to do it in more detail later on in the meeting, but perhaps talk about where we are with our official plan update and that sort of timeline.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm just, I'll maybe defer to Dirk because I don't have that email from Dirk with the timeline right in front of me at the moment. I'm trying to run too many different devices here at the moment. But Dirk, if I could unmute you, could you maybe speak to the timeline involved in the official plan update?
Thank you through the chair.
Just 1 second, Dirk. I just wanted to introduce you for anybody that is watching through YouTube or as an attendee. Dirk is the head of planning for the County of Middlesex. And because I think of the scope of this project, he's sitting in for some added support for all of us. So we appreciate, Dirk, you participating, and this is a good opportunity for you to speak to the official plan.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself there at the start. So as you've mentioned, we are undertaking an update to the official plan this year, and council hasn't seen the details of this timeline yet. We recently engaged a planning consultant, and they are just starting this month. The next couple of months are intended to be background analysis, and then we're targeting September, October for public consultation and engagement. With the little asterisk next to it, of course, not knowing exactly what's going to happen with the pandemic and consultation and public meetings and that. So we're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. So we may have to be a little bit nimble on our feet on that one. We are, so by, again, given September, October, public engagement and consultation, then we'd be looking at some sort of draft document in November. And that again, we go for public review and consultation with the goal to try to have it before council with a recommendation for adoption in one form or another before the end of the year. And I should maybe just step back a little bit. And really it's the official plan update is, municipalities in Ontario are required every 5 years to update their official plan. And particularly in the case of Lucan Medall, where Lucan has experienced a significant amount of growth in the last number of years, it's a great time right now to sort of look at the boundaries of Lucan, Grant, and Clanny-Boy and your other settlement areas, and figure out if we've got, if the township has enough land designated for development, what the right mix of development should be, low, medium, high, and where it should be, and how the servicing and whatnot goes in behind that. So that's sort of at a high level, the timing and the project scope.
Okay. And I guess official plan update 101, this would foster the discussion of the things that Councillor Mastarakis was saying. What is it that we want with intensification? To Deputy Mayor Mander's point, what do we want our community to look like? That would come out of having this, going through this process, right?
Again, through the mayor, it is council's process. Staff will study, what you ask us to. One of the very first steps will be to bring the consultant in and sit down with council at a public meeting soon to be, or at a council meeting soon to be scheduled, and sort of, outline the process that we're looking at, get your feedback. Council are best able to identify issues that need to be looked at, and we can fine tune the scope of the project based on that. So from what I've heard tonight, this is, the density or the scale of development would be one of those things that certainly could be included in that project.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments? I guess before I open it up to the public, I will throw in my 2 cents for what it's worth. I think I kind of echo, what Councillor Mastarakis said. Certainly the building, the way it's presented, is attractive. I've had opportunity to see other buildings that have been built that are very similar to the one that's proposed. So in question, I don't believe that, I think it would be quite attractive on the site. concern for me, because I do believe that I believe that there are mechanisms in place that Dan has spoken to, that we can hold site specific. So in the event that the building is flipped, or in the event that something happens before shovels in the ground, that we can, hold the building to the site. To Dave Manders, or to the deputy mayor, excuse me, point, there is concern. How do you hold them to the drawing of the concept of what the building looks like? Because to the point, all of a sudden it could become a 6-foot building. And is that really what our community is ready for at this point? It's, I've been on council for 10 going on 11 years, and this is the first time we've had this discussion about the height. Is it a sign of things to come? When I look at other neighboring municipalities, I don't see that sort of height being built in similar communities to us. Obviously where we are, we've got Exeter to the north, we've got St. Mary's, Ilderton. They're very similar. Some are larger than Lucan, obviously, but I don't see that sort of height. That being said, it's no secret. An apartment building will be going on this site, and apartment buildings are needed in our community. I don't mean to speak for my counselors, but I'm sure they've heard the same comments that I have heard over the time that I've been on council about rentals, and we don't have that. We don't have that to offer in our community. But the other concern is, and the deputy mayor spoke about it, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I will be very interested in listening to the comments from the attendees, is though making this decision what it would mean for our community and what we are setting ourselves up for. And I guess maybe that could be a quick question for Dan at this point is, for the sake of discussion, we approved the 17.5 with certain site specific restrictions on it. What does that mean for the next application coming? And now, is that now the height that we have set ourselves up for in Lucan?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. That is a good question. A lot of conversation around planning, and I'll just speak from a higher level in general, is this idea of precedent-setting decisions. So, if you approve a building at 17.5 meters here, it's automatically assumed that that's appropriate elsewhere. The only thing that I would point out is that planning is not required to make decisions based on precedent. So there's no such thing as precedent in planning. Certainly there's a public perception of precedent. There's a public perception from developers of a precedent, but each application is inherently judged independently of its own and the requests. And it really is based on a site specific context. You could say in certain instances, it's more appropriate to have height and density located closer to your arterial or collector roads. It's not appropriate to locate it next to small local roads. Developing higher intense uses are more appropriate at specific nodes as opposed to in the middle of nowhere. So just from a general hierarchy and theory of planning. So does this set a precedent? Me, fundamentally, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, each site, again, is judged inherently by the surrounding parameters that would exist.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor, do you have another comment before we open up the public discussion?
My question is I guess maybe it's a dumb question to a planner, I don't know, but on this, like aesthetically, this building and this developer, which I like, wants to make it more spacious, wants an extra foot on every level, wants to make the rooftop, at least Adam said to me, potentially it's just a rooftop design. It's just over 1 meter high. And that's very nice for the entrance of our community after talking to them. But what I don't like is that's definitely, and again, as opposed to precedent, I feel it's harder to defend. How defendable are we as opposed to the mayor's question? Do we open ourselves harder to defend smart planning, to your comments, Dan? Sorry, but anyways. So I feel it does, by the way. But at a 5-story height that is the same height of traditional apartments at 6 stories, like a 5-story building, I believe flat rooftop traditional heights would be 15 meters. So on this, is there any rationale, or should I even be thinking like this, that the living quarters, or it's a 5-story apartment and they've chosen to dress it up? And is that, unfortunately, I'm more about, is it defendable? Is it defendable as opposed to, again, defendable for someone maybe wanting to do a 6-story flat rooftop? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Like here you got a developer wanting to dress up a unit, make it higher because he wants it to be more spacious. But I'm concerned about setting a precedent for traditional apartment at 6 stories. So.
Yeah, through the chair to Deputy Mayor. That is a good point. I understand where you're coming from. If you did want to limit it specifically to that 5 stories, and there's a concern more specifically with the number that's attached to that height, then I would suggest, you may look at a situation that you add a specific reference to the number of stories in the site-specific provisions. So it would be to a maximum of 17.5 meters or 5 stories, whichever is lesser. So that basically limits your box to, okay, even if we're dealing with someone that's going to build the bare minimums and they can sneak in an extra 6-story, hold on, there's that extra provision in a bylaw that says no, you can't go past 5. It's 17.5 or the lesser of 5 stories.
So that'd be a way to protect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Michelle, did you have a comment or anything to add to that? I kind of saw you moving. I didn't know if you put your hand up or not.
Sorry, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to reiterate what Dan had said, that's exactly where I was going with this. We have no issue with, as part of the zoning request for the 17.5 meters, that it specifically states 17.5 meters or 5 stories. Again, we have no intent of going to 6 stories at all. This building design is something that's been done before. We're looking to repeat that. So there's no, honestly, there's no chance that it's going to 6 stories. So there's no issue with that provision being added.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, before I open it back up to, open it up to the public, I'm just going to ask at this point for any last comments from council. You will have another opportunity again after the public has spoken, but is there anything that council wanted to add? Or did you want to wait, Daniel or Councillor Regan? Okay, perfect. So at this point, I know that we do have some questions on the line or in the queue. Just reminding attendees to use the Q&A function. If your question is read, then we will unmute you so that you have the opportunity to follow up. So the first one in the queue is from Amir Shanudo. And Amir, I think Ron's bringing him in. Did you want to ask it, Amir?
Hello, everybody. My name is Amir Shanuda. I'm the developer who has developed Lucan Woods development north of Lucan. I'm glad to see development happening in Lucan. Lucan is growing, and we're always encouraged to see other developers coming into town and offering different offerings. I think that's very healthy for the community. On that note, I would like to comment on the height. I think that if I recall, we were discussing, our plans for development, and one big mandate that council did really highlight and stress at that time is that while we're looking for opportunities to offer different housing options for residents, we didn't want to totally alter the character and why people come to Lucan to live. They come in and they always express the fact that we live in Lucan, it's quiet, small, it gives us that small community feel, and it always seems to resonate with people to be in a small town. I think at that time it was well understood by us that we're developing in a small community. We want to offer these options, but we also want to respect what people want and how people feel in the town. We didn't want to come in and ruffle feathers or make people feel that we're building this mid to high rise or anything like that to make them totally feel out of character. So our solution for this was to actually build three stories. Our units are also 9-foot ceilings and so on. So again, we know that there is no efficiency in building 3 buildings to achieve 69 units. However, to actually offer that offering, we felt that this was needed in order to be suitable, to be well received, and to respect the character of the town. My other comment is about, obviously, I understand in planning, building, higher density buildings closer to arterial roads is the preferred. Being in a close intersection is definitely also recommended. But also I wanted to point out that at this height, at 5 stories, at 17.5 meters, which is the same height as 6 stories, that really sets the tone as you drive in from London to Lucan. And that's probably one of the first things that you see is, again, a building, whether it's 5 stories or 6 stories, I think it's the same height as 6. So that's what you see. That's the first thing you see before you even get to the first residential development, like a single family homes. So I think that really kind of reflects on where Lucan is going to be headed over the next few years. And if that's what council wants to do, I mean, so be it. I think that council ultimately reflects the will of the people, and if that's what the council would like to do, that would be definitely setting the tone for what others may expect in the future. And I feel that it would be definitely quite a move to go up to this level of height. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Amir. That was more of a comment, I believe. Ron, I think we have a request to read a question or comment.
Correct, Madam Mayor. The second question, and I'll read it out loud. It's from Richard Hudson. His comment, and it was actually made before Councillor Regan actually brought it up, so I believe the question's been answered. But Mr. Hudson's question was, so if we agree to rezone for 5 stories, then can they just go ahead and put up 2 5 stories on the land like they showed us with the 2 4 stories? So I think the question was, can we restrict? And I think that question's been answered by Mr. Fitzgerald, in that we can, or council has the ability to do a site-specific zoning that would restrict the setbacks and the location of the proposed building to what's being proposed. So that was the first question. The second question is from Zoe Ellis. And the question is, if the height isn't approved, will the developer proceed with 2 buildings? And I guess that's more of a question to the, through you, Madam Mayor, to the applicant.
Okay, and then are you going to bring Zoe in for follow-up? Or,
I can ask her, well, she's probably listening right now. Miss Ellis, if you wish anything further, please just let me know through the Q&A function.
okay. So yeah, I think that question is probably directed to Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To be honest, I would have to speak to my client about that. I'm not sure what their plans are going to be for the property if the height increase isn't permitted. Obviously, they have to look at alternative options, and I'm not sure what that would look like. I don't think at this point they've totally put their minds to that, as they were hopeful that, you know, this was the path that they were going to take. So obviously they would need to take some time to decide what they'd want to do with the property.
Thank you. And there's another one to be read. Did you want to read that one, Ron?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The next question is from Tessa Cherry. And her question is, council clarified, quote, affordable housing, but similar to the number of buildings on the site and to the point of how many levels that would fit in the overall height allowance. How does council propose to restrict or limit the building owners from turning the units into geared to income or subsidized units?
So I believe that's a question for Dan. But I mean, subsidized and rent geared to income housing is a function of social services, which is a county, which is a county initiative. But I don't know, Dan, can you speak to that?
Yeah, through the chair, Madam Mayor, to the question. Effectively, when it comes to residential uses, there's nothing that differentiates, you know, geared to income housing versus standard residential. Residential in the province and through the provincial policy statement is just considered residential. So we don't differentiate between individuals' salaries, you know, race, color, whatever that might be. It's just residential.
To the question of social housing, though, that would be an initiative where if there was a need that the county saw, that they would initiate social housing in the community if that was the need, if it's social housing.
Through the chair, that's something that could be initiated through the county. However, those types of proposals can also be initiated privately. So it goes both ways, I guess.
Okay, I guess to Tessa, was there any follow-up on that? And I guess she'll let us know if there is. Ron.
Madam Mayor, if I may just ask Michelle if she wanted to pipe in on that. Maybe have the applicant, you can explain a little bit more about your units, the size of the units. I don't think we've heard sort of the square footage of the units. Maybe that'll help alleviate some of the fear that's out there.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. With regards to the unit sizes, they do range. They're roughly anywhere from 900 square feet. They do go up over 1,200 square feet. So they're a great size. There are a few one-bedroom units. A number of them are 2 bedrooms with 2 bathroom units. These are standard rent apartments that you would find. And again, they would be in the typical market range for you know, typical rents here. They're at this point in time, they are not proposing anything in terms of affordable housing initiatives or things like that.
Right, thanks for that. Okay, there's no other questions that have been, or comments, excuse me, that have been submitted. I will take this opportunity to ask the attendees that have joined us one last call out for any comments that you would like to make. One's come through. Okay, Richard Hudson has one.
Would you like me to read the question, Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, I have one more question regarding proposed amendment. So Mr. Hudson, did you want me to unmute you? I think that's the only way to do this. So I'm going to unmute you and let you actually speak. Okay, so you should be able to ask your question. So specifically, what do you mean by regarding the proposed amendment?
So you guys had mentioned proposed amendments, one for locking in the location of the building, and also for the height being at 17.5 versus 5 stories, whatever, the 17.5 or 5 or less. To get those amendments in, does council need to oppose this whole application and then resubmit a whole new application? Or if this one is accepted now, will you be able to add those after? Or if it's accepted, then they can just say that and scratch that and not actually put the amendments in?
Okay, Dan?
That's it, Chair. Mr. Hudson, the motion before council today in the planners through the planners report, sorry, is to accept the report as information. So there's no, based on the planning report, there's no recommendation at this meeting that we're requesting at this particular time. With that said, if the developer, if council felt it appropriate to introduce site-specific zoning provisions to control the development of the land based on what the proposal has been shown conceptually, then that can be done as part of the planning report that will come back with a recommendation.
What about the plan report? What's that, Mr. Hudson?
Sorry, and are we informed of the planning report? Or is that just a council thing?
Did you want to answer that, Dan?
Yep, through the chair. So with respect to the item coming back to council, this would formulate the public hearing or the public meeting for the application. So the planning report that does come back to council with recommendation will take into consideration, the comments that we have heard today. As well, it would be, the recommendation would be based on planning rationale as well as the recommendations the input of the public that we have received today, as well as the comments received here tonight. So the report would be posted prior to the council meeting where the recommendation will be brought back to. Council would have the opportunity, the public would have the opportunity to review that report. We would be open to receiving comments after this public hearing. I guess that would kind of hopefully answer the question.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I think to Mr. Hudson, as we move along into the meeting after the comments, we will go over the formalized next steps of what we see happening over the next few weeks. And hopefully that will clear anything up. And if it doesn't, I mean, we can certainly answer your questions if you call the office tomorrow or something with regards to the process. But we'll go over that as we near the end of this portion of discussion. So I do see on the participants that one of our participants has raised his hand. So I'm going to assume that he has a question, and that would be from Mr. George Boa. So Ron, did you want to bring him in and unmute him, and then he can ask make his comments?
Yep. Mr. Boa, can you hear us? I will unmute you if I can. Okay, that is, I'll try one more time here. Mr. Boa, can you unmute yourself? I can't seem to do it from,
No,
oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, I just did that.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Boa.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the proposed application. I've already submitted a letter with my concerns. I'm not going to delve into every aspect of that letter. I will try and shorten this. Basically, the official plan of Lucan the Gulf, section 2.1.5.2, provides a clear guideline on scale, density, and form. That guideline is to respect and to be sensitive to the small town character of Lucan, as well as to limit the density and height of new development. A proposal to increase the maximum height to 17.5 meters is far from respecting, being sensitive, and limiting the height of new development. I do not believe that there are any existing apartment buildings in Lucan that exceed the 10-meter R3 zoning. This block has already had a zone change to increase the maximum height to 12 meters from the 10-meter height in the R3 zone when the subdivision was first proposed. I urge council to heed the direction of the official plan and limit the increase any further. This block is within Schedule A of the official plan in section 2.1.5.51 land use. As stated in that section, as the primary use of land in Schedule A is to be single unit detached dwellings. Other permitted forms are to be townhouses and low rise and small scale apartment buildings. I reiterate, low rise and small scale apartment buildings. This proposal is a high rise apartment building proposal. Basically, it's 75% more than the original in height than the original R3 zoning. Under section 2.1.1, goals and objectives statement F, specifically statement F, provides direction to maintain essential qualities of privacy, quiet enjoyment, public health and safety, and land use compatibility in residential areas. Increasing the maximum height to 17.5 meters is not in concert with this guideline to maintain privacy and quiet enjoyment. Council has also received a petition with a significant number of residents within the mandatory notification zone, plus a significant number of nearby residents just outside the notification zone that oppose this zone change. These residents would be significantly impacted with this zone change. Not only that, but residents at locations far distance from this location and all corners of Lucan, and who would not have a direct impact by this building, yet also have expressed opposition to the proposed height increase. I went on this circulation over approximately 3 to 4 afternoons to an evening. Given 2 more weeks, I'm sure I canvassed in other areas of Lucan, maybe 1 or 2 houses per street, just to get a broad range perspective from one end to the other end, north and south. And people were against it. They hadn't even heard it, but they were against it and signed. I'm sure I could get far more residents in opposition if I had more time. So I urge council to say no to this proposal. Those are my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Boa, for those, and they will be noted. There is a follow-up from Ms. Ellis. Ron, did you want to read it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The follow-up question from Zoe Ellis is, what is the plan if it's not approved? What are the next steps for the applicant? So I would suggest that this is a question for Michelle.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Essentially, it's going back to, if this rezoning is not approved, it's going back to the current zoning conditions and coming up with a plan that complies with those conditions. again, that is the reason why we provided this alternative concept plan to show, what we could accommodate based on the existing zoning regulations, which could essentially be two four-story apartment buildings with 78 units at 3 meter setbacks from the property line. So again, when this request is not being approved, that the property owners do have to look at this and the realities that they're dealing with and find out what the best options are. They obviously have an investment here, and they need to do what is going to work from that perspective as well. So essentially be going back to the existing zoning regulations and making a development fit within those terms.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, this will be the last call for public comments before I turn it back over to council for follow-up. So one last call out for public comments from anybody that's on the line. Okay. Ron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a few that just popped up here. The first one is from Mr. Boa. And I'll just ask if Mr. Boa wants to ask the question live, or does he want me to read it? Mr. Boa, are you still there? Yep.
Yes, I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Basically, it's a comment. I'm quite surprised that the two building proposal that was shown tonight, there was a proposal for 80 units, a sketch handed out by two of the developers' representatives when they went around the neighborhood, and it doesn't even resemble this one. So I'm not sure what kind of proposal the developer has been telling people, because I have the sketch with me. It does not look like that at all with the two buildings.
That's a comment. I mean, the application in front of us is for one building. And Michelle, did you have any?
Yes, through your worship, if I could speak to that. So the plan that was presented tonight was a plan that we prepared yesterday to give the context of a development, a potential development based on the existing zoning regulations, as I said. The property owners, Adam Verhoog and his wife, they did speak to the neighborhood. They went around to all the neighbors. Again, we were not able to hold a typical open house meeting that we normally would have because of the COVID circumstances. So that was the next best alternative in terms of making sure that the correct information is presented to all of the residents. The drawing that they provided to the neighbors was the drawing that was used as part of the rezoning application in 2017. So that was a proposal that was provided at that time to say, we are looking at this as an option, as a conceptual site plan. I know that, I believe that was brought forward to Dan, but I know that Dan, you were not part of that process back in 2017 as well. So there was a bit of confusion, I think, amongst the neighbors as to what that plan was and why Adam and his wife had presented that. But the reason why they were using that is that's what was used and presented to council at the time that the application came in with the original increase in height to the 12 meters. The one that's before you today is an alternative. So there's a number of different ways that this property can be developed under the current zoning regulations. It's just a matter of what would work best. And, there's so many factors that have to be taken into consideration when the final plan is decided. But the reality is there's a number of options that can be considered for this site.
Thank you. Did you have follow-up to that, Mr. Boa?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, the representatives were giving the impression that this other alternative plan was already improved, and hence I did send an email to Dan asking if there was an 80-unit apartment building, a single 80-unit apartment building. That had been approved through the site plan process, and his response was there hadn't even been a submission. So again, there was much confusion being produced.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Michelle, follow up?
Yeah, sorry, very briefly, Your Worship, just to clarify, I think it was a difference of terminology when that plan was presented. So what my clients were referring to when they provided that plan is to say, from a zoning perspective, it was approved. It complied with all of the zoning regulations. So it did not require any additional zoning approvals in order to allow it, other than the standard site plan approval process, which, as you know, is a technical process that you go through. But in terms of permissions, regulations, that plan complied with all of the current zoning regulations that apply today.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, moving on. We have a follow-up comment from Ms. Ellis, and she's just asking us not to approve the amendment or the application. And then we have another one. And I don't have the last name. Ron.
I believe it's Marcus Johnston is the person in question there.
Yeah.
So he had a couple of comments, and maybe if with your permission, Madam Mayor, I'll ask him if he wants to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1 second here, and I'll bring him aboard. Okay, Mr. Marcus, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Okay, would you like to ask your question, or do you want me to read your question?
Well, it's just a quick comment.
Okay, yep, go ahead. Go ahead.
When the gentleman was coming around with the petition, he informed us that they were trying to build a 5-story with more units, higher traffic flow in the neighborhood, which really had my wife and I concerned, because when we came to Lucan, we were looking to stay in a small kind of close-knit community. So we were kind of, I guess, scared from what his perception would have been to sign the petition. After we talked with the developer and they explained that they were actually looking at reducing the number of units, increasing the size of the apartments so rent would be more in line with our neighborhood, and also that it would actually lower the amount of traffic coming through the neighborhood. We just wanted to state that we would like to have our name withdrawn from that petition. We felt the information provided to us was inaccurate, and we would support the 5-story luxury apartment building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments, Mr. Johnson. And then final follow-up, oh, no, there's two, from Miss Ellis, and this would be a question for Dan. She just wants to know if single detached family homes are an option on the site.
For the chair, to the public comment, unfortunately, given the existing zoning permissions, if we were just looking at it from that perspective, single detached dwellings are not a permitted use in the R3-H-H.
Yeah, I think the point is that this was always going to be an apartment building. Well, at least since 2009. So there is one more comment. And Ron?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, through you, I've got a question here. It's just a number. Maybe if I unmute them, maybe they can first state their name, and then we can take their question or their comment. So,
yes.
Okay, 1 second here, and I shall try and unmute them. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I don't know who this is, but it's the number says 716-5347-3350. Go ahead.
But please state your name first for the minutes in the record. Hello?
Hello. Okay, I'm not, oh, that person muted themselves again here, so I will try and unmute them. There we go. Okay, if this person could state their name. Okay, I'm not, I don't know what's going on there, but I can hear some background noise, so I think maybe they don't realize they are live. If you could please state your name and make your comment. Okay.
Okay, I think I would just mute that and go on. So one final call out for comments from our attendees from the public.
Madam Mayor,
Oh.
if I can interrupt, person said it's Brian Kelly. So I'm gonna try it one more time and maybe I can bring him aboard here. So let's see if this works. Okay, Mr. Kelly, can you hear us? Okay. In the absence of being able to speak live, if you could maybe type in your comments, we can read them aloud as part of the public record.
So maybe while Mr. Kelly is doing that, I'll say one last call out for public comment. Okay, so I'm going to, with the exception of Brian's comments, I'm going to close the public comment portion, and I'm going to move it back to council comments. So after listening to the discussion and the comments that have been presented from the public, is there anything else from council? And I'm just looking at this and just reminding, oh, did he get one? Okay, actually, I'm going to take that back because Brian's typed his question out. So let's get that answered and then we'll move. Okay, Ron.
Madam Mayor, if I may, so Mr. Kelly's comment is, I just wanted to add that I can hear you, so he can hear us, but we can't hear him for some reason. So I apologize. I don't know what's happening there, but he just wanted to add that he is in complete approval and I live directly across the road at 33329 Richmond Street. So he's in favor of the proposal.
Okay. All right. So members of council, are there any comments after hearing the public discussion? Councillor Regan, you had your hand up before we started the public consultation, or the public comments. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Actually, my question was answered by Ron about 10 minutes ago, so I'm okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for remembering me.
Okay. All right, Deputy Mayor.
A couple things. I'm really concerned on the comments on the one building and that the appreciation and the like of the one building, and I am too. But I'm not going to be naive enough. I think everyone that's saying that needs to realize that the space is there, the ability is there to come back to a future council, depending on demand of this building, that site beside another apartment building would be a good site to conform to the conditions of a second building. And I think anyone that thinks there's not going to be a second building there in the future, I'm not that person. So I want to say that. I think that they're showing two different. It's interesting. They're not the nice plan. They're not showing a potential future growth plan of a second building. But then the other plan, they're showing they're showing what they're showing for some reason. But again, depending on market demand for that building, I can't see a council providing there's tons of green space there, tons of parking. I feel in the future probably would be a good spot for a second building. So I I'm just concerned on the comments and everyone's excitement on the one building. So for my mind, and when I go through my process of accepting this or denying this, it'll be also about the future. Again, site specific, I find that a mature subdivision. The subdivision that's there, the people that are there had the ability to know that there was a 12-meter proposal there, so they chose to live there. The ability to know that if they wanted to go to the township office was there. I do think this could be impactful to the whole community. I really don't know where I sit on this. I'm concerned about. I just feel that for this application, the vision of our community and our planning needs to come first before this development, and we're not there yet, unfortunately. But I'm trying to get my head around this and also the future look of that site. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments from or follow up from council? Councillor Mastarakis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the comments is I'm a newer newer councillor like Dan Regan.
You want to be mayor tonight?
I could be mayor. Do you want me to be mayor tonight? But for me, the official plan is like the advertisement for Lucan. 10 meters is the limit. You're buying in this town. We're going to keep a low high rise. I don't know how fluid the document is. I don't know what councillors can and can't do, but the other part of that is as a community, we've said no to others, and they've abided by our guidelines to not do that. What has changed in our vision of the community from previously having buildings like this to today to make a decision to go from 10 in essence to 17 and a half? I know the change has gone to 12, but what has changed from our vision of what we're doing in Lucan is my concern. So that's where my comments from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mastarakis. Any other further comments, questions? Okay, I think at this time, it certainly has been a very fruitful discussion. We've had a lot of information. Ron, did you want to say something?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I believe the applicant's, Michelle has a comment.
Sure, yep.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron. Through you, Your Worship, just to speak to Deputy Mander's comments, I'm just trying to give you some level of comfort here, and I know that's difficult to do, but there's another component that in terms of the grand scheme of this proposal that's before you, but there's two things that you need to look at here. There's one from a planning perspective when you're laying out a site, there's one from a planning perspective, but there's another factor that you need to take into consideration, and that's from the marketing perspective. So there's a lot of instances where we have applications where we could come in and we could come up with a design that fits with the zoning regulations. For example, the City of London, their apartment requirements are for parking for apartments in the City of London is 1.25 spaces per for dwelling units, and that's for the majority of the city. If you're in the downtown London area, you actually don't have to even provide parking for apartment units because that's what the zoning regulations allow. The reality is you could never market a building like that. You can't lease a building in downtown London with no parking. So there's a lot of factors that you need to look into. So although the zoning regulations in Lucan are 1.5 parking spaces per unit, the reality is this is still a rural area. The majority of the people that are coming in, they still have they still have two cars. There's going to be some people that, you know, they're retired, they only have one car, but a lot of people are still two car couples, two car families, things like that. So while there may be space on the property to accommodate another building, there's not enough parking. And when Adam came forward with this plan, he was very specific in saying, and he's got experience in this area, he knows what people require. So to say that we could accommodate a building, absolutely, you have the space to do that. But the reality is, can you market another building on this site with the same number of parking spaces? Because you are still going to be, at the end of the day, you're going to be restricted on the number of parking spaces that you can provide. But to provide one parking space per one unit, you won't be able to lease it in this market. It's a rural area. People still drive to the city. People still drive to other locations. There are a lot of amenities and things like that you can, live off of in Lucan and not have to go anywhere else. But at the same time, people still have to travel outside of the Lucan area for alternative things. So when we're looking at that, even in the city of London, we would never build an apartment building with less than 1.5 parking spaces. And that's when there's public transit, there's alternative modes of transportation. So there are limitations in Lucan with respect to those items. So from a planning perspective, you may be able to do it, but it's not practical from a marketing perspective. And that's the other side you have to look at in terms of assessing whether or not another building would be appropriate here.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Follow up, Dave.
I agree 100% with you. I wish well, it's going to be taped because that's my biggest argument, but I can't defend it. That's the problem. We have development in Lucan, and I agree 100%. It's mind-boggling that they don't hold us. We're a drive-to community on everything, but we have to go by provincial policy. So I agree with your comments, but the ability for someone to build in Lucan that doesn't have the same concerns as you have, if the property was to be sold in the future, that doesn't share your concerns that I do, that's my concern. So I just want to make that point. Like, I agree 100% with you, and I wish we could defend it on somebody that doesn't have the same thoughts as yourself and your client. So I do appreciate that. But.
Thank you, and through you, just your worship, just to final touch on that is, while another person could come in and change that, the reality is the market is going to dictate it. If there is not enough parking spaces, the units cannot rent. They won't rent. And someone is not going to invest in that. Someone is not going to, it's a substantial investment. They're not going to put those funds forward without the assurances that you're going to get the spaces leased. And you don't want to put that on the line for something like that. Because the reality is, if you can't provide the tenants with 2 parking spaces when they require it, they'll go somewhere else.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so as I was starting to say, I digested a lot of information, a lot of public comment. As Dan mentioned earlier, he hasn't prepared a recommendation. So at this point, it would just be a motion to receive his report for information. I think that what the next steps, and Dan can back me up on this or add to it, but the idea would be to come back at our next council meeting, which is July 14th, to have a recommendation presented to us, where again, there's opportunity for us to discuss and debate through all of, through the report. And while it's a regular council meeting and it's a public meeting, there won't be opportunity at that meeting for public participation. So in light of that, and in light of all the information and discussion that those that have been on as an attendee or might be watching on YouTube Live or back on another date, we want to provide opportunity for you to present any further comments that you might have. And we would accept those until June 26th. And you can email those to Dan and he'll provide his email address. And maybe for follow-up, we can kind of post that procedure through our social media and on our website for any follow-up. So I think that would be it. Dan, did you have anything to add to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Nope, that's everything that we would have.
Okay, and just what's your email address in case anybody's writing that down right now?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Tina, if you don't mind providing the planning email address.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. The planning email address set for Lucan is planning@lucanbidulph.on.ca.
Perfect.
And anything received through there will be forwarded to planning staff.
Okay, great. And so just as a reminder, we'll accept those comments until June 26th. I know there was a question, and I can't remember who posed it, but about the process for the next meeting. Our agenda is posted on the Friday prior to our council meeting. So whatever that would be, July 10th, 9th, the day before what was supposed to be Bacon Fest. So the public can access that. And certainly, you know, while there wouldn't be opportunity at the council meeting for you to participate, should you see something in the planning report recommendation that you want to speak to, all of us around the horseshoe, from the mayor, the deputy mayor, and all three councillors would be open to having a discussion with you. You can submit those comments to us that we can explore as we would enter into discussion on the 14th. So if that's it from council on comments, at this time, I would entertain a motion to receive the planner's report for information.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, that's Councillor Regan and seconded Councillor Westman. And all opposed? And that's carried. So with that, and just as I mentioned, maybe Lisa, you can post something on the website and our social media, just indicating how people can continue to submit comments until June 26th. With that, I do need a motion to reconvene into regular council. So mover and seconder for that. Deputy Mayor and Daniel, all in
Madam
favor?
Mayor? Oh, sorry.
Or all opposed? And that's carried.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
would you be opposed to a 2-minute recess?
No, I was going to actually bring that up. And I believe that we have lost some of our participants, and I think Michelle went off, and I meant to thank her for her input. But certainly for our attendees that have attended, you are welcome to stay for the rest of the council meeting. If you were here in person, that's what I would say. But I also do respect that it is a beautiful summer evening. So if you want to go off, you can just exit yourself. And yeah, if council just can take a 2 or 3 minute break, that would be great. And we'll just keep the feed going live.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Okay. Just wait for Councillor Mastarakis to join us. There he is. Okay. So, moving on. We have no delegations, so that's a good thing. But we're moving on to minutes. You've got the minutes from June 2nd and from our regular council meeting, and then our special meeting minutes from June 9th. You've had the opportunity to go over them, and unless there's anything that needs to be amended or added to, can I get a mover and seconder to approve the council minutes for June 2nd and June 9th as circulated? Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Business arising from the minutes. There's nothing new on that list. I believe that it is all ongoing unless council wanted to add anything from the last couple meetings into the business arising list. Okay, moving on to communications. There's a few in front of you, and the one that has been pulled for discussion is with regards to our AMO annual conference update. And it's with regards to delegation. Ron, delegation requests. Ron, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the typically what happens at the annual conference is the municipalities have an opportunity to meet with the various ministries and in regards to issues that affect the individual municipalities. Obviously, this year with the virtual conference, they are still entertaining requests to meet with the various ministries. However, there is an if. That is only if you are registered. So I believe Councillor Regan, Councillor Deputy Mayor Manders, and myself, we just actually requested the refund, and I believe that has been processed now. So I believe, Madam Mayor, you are still registered, correct? Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful.
And I believe Mr. Mastarakis will be registered if he isn't, because he's running for position on the board.
Okay, correct. So we've got 2 out of 5 members of council that are registered. So we should still be okay to request a delegation with any one of the ministries. So I guess the question is which ministries would we want a meeting with, and what is council's wishes. So at this point, we did have a meeting with the MTO regarding the Elginfield yard, and I don't want to steal Mr. Little's thunder there. So Jeff, maybe you could pipe in at this point. Maybe it's appropriate to discuss a little bit about that, because I think that's going to have an impact on council's decision whether or not we request a delegation. So go ahead. No. And we just lost them.
Oh.
Okay. Well, maybe I can paraphrase. This the meeting we had was basically a conference call with the IMOS group, and IMOS is the group that looks after the road maintenance on provincial highways in our area. They also control. Oh, there he's back again.
There we go. I don't know.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so we had a meeting with MTO and IMOS, just like Ron said, and it's usually this meeting takes place after the winter season and just kind of reviews what has taken place. It happened last year. Joe sat in with us, and just like he did last year, just to review how the process went. Was there any issues moving forward to the next year? What's going to happen and that sort of thing. So as the meeting went along, it became very clear that the MTO wanted to kind of announce or kind of bring something up, and the fact that they have always said along the way that 2024 the contract changes over, and they can't guarantee us access to the sand salt shed after 2024. During this meeting, it became apparent that they would like us to leave earlier than 2024. They're not interested in forcing us before 2024, but there is an interest to move that date forward. And in discussion, it became clear that they would like to try to introduce some experimental materials on the road in this area, and that they would like to use our space in the sand salt shed to introduce that material into the system. They asked us for basically our timeline on moving out of the shed or building our own supply or securing our own supply somewhere else. And Ron and I basically discussed that, it is in the back of our mind, but that we were thinking that 2024 was our timetable, and that we would still like to, we'd be interested in talking with the new contract, whether it's IMOS or whoever it is on working out a further length to stay there after 2024. But at this point, I'm not sure where this is going to go. So we've set another meeting up for September. They're going to supply us with some information on the experimental materials they're introducing into the system. And we'll go from there. It was kind of more of I wouldn't call it a shock, but it certainly wasn't the meeting we were expecting to come through. After the meeting, I think Ron and I both said IMOS, they are very good to work with. It certainly wasn't, they actually commented how well we work together. They actually commented how well Joe looks after things and how well Luke and Badolf accommodates and make sure everything flows well. They actually had some really, really good comments to say towards us. So I thought that was really good. But, no matter what, the bottom line was the MTO was interested in next year being our last year at the sand salt shed. So I think there's more to follow on this. I know Ron and I both said, we can talk about this and see where we're going to go with this. But it was an interesting meeting. It certainly wasn't the meeting I was expecting today. So.
Okay. Ron.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I'll just add a few of my comments to that. It's disappointing in the fact that, this has been the arrangement, and it's been a very mutually beneficial relationship for the last 15 years. It really, I don't know, something doesn't smell right here, because really we actually even brought up the fact that we're going to be using less material on a go forward basis, because the county is going to be assuming our largest or longest stretch of paved road, which being the Wayland line. So even once we brought that up, then all of a sudden, then they brought in the fact that, well, we would really like to use your space for these alternative materials. And it's like, okay, so it doesn't matter what I say, you're going to throw something else at why it should be brought out. So we all have one taxpayer, and I think that's maybe lost a little bit sometimes. And we're not looking to make waves for anybody, but it just seems like there's a better solution in this time of, we hear all the politicians at the provincial level are talking about efficiencies and everything else. Well, certainly this is an efficient way to conduct our business in conjunction with them. And it's been like I said, a mutually beneficial relationship with IMOS. They make a bit of money off us. We get to use their loader. We get to use their space. I'm certainly not looking forward to, having Jeff bring forward to council the fact that we're looking at it, maybe $100,000 figure to build our own salt sand storage when, there's this perfect facility that we've used for the last 15 years available.
So maybe this is a good opportunity to request a delegation with MTO. We met with MTO at Roma this year. And we did bring this up, and certainly it was of interest to them when we shared with them that we were going to be transferring the Wayland line. And while I don't want to be in a position where we're looking at stepping on the local level of MTO and stepping on their toes and going over, you know, to Ron's point, perhaps the discussion is, you know, the province talks about efficiencies, it talks about partnerships. Here's a perfect opportunity, and that can be our angle. So that, I think, would be a worthwhile request. I mean, we did meet with them in Roma. Who knows whether they'll go for it, but I think the request could be made, certainly. Did you have any other ideas? And then I'll ask the deputy mayor.
The only other one I could think of was the sort of the repeat with the phase 2 application with the one ministry. So I don't know, we may have a decision before then. I don't know that that's really necessary.
I don't think there's any need to go down that route. The applications are already in there, and it'll be what it'll be. So, Dave?
I guess, can I talk about the salt bins? I know it's about the app ministry, or should I wait for comments later?
If you're going to talk about the salt bins, I would appreciate it if we waited until just time.
Gotcha. Okay. The other thing then is another delegation. Would it be a repeat performance, which hasn't gone anywhere, on the allocation of farmland and using, you know, not using what's maybe in Granton and seeing those same people again? Pretty. What we did last year.
Yeah, I think they made it very clear that you know, they're listening to us. So I if you're asking me my opinion, and I'll give you my opinion, I don't think there's much value in repeating that, but okay. I defer to Madam Mayor if that's what you wish. We could do that again. But I felt pretty good coming out of that meeting that they would take into account any comments or the big picture.
But I guess we haven't had any follow-up though, have we?
No, because I think the ball's in our court. We need to submit something to them, and at that point, and we won't be in that position before the AMO conference, the middle to end of August.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Did anybody else have any ideas? I know that you and I did talk about perhaps reaching out to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs with regards to, again, efficiencies and certainly the use of this platform and extending it beyond the emergency orders. So on that note, I mean, I did talk to the county because they're huge fans of that. And, you know, we talked about maybe a joint submission with the county and Luke and Bidoff making that. So I'll follow up with Bill on that one because I think that is appropriate. I think we've all agreed that while we want to be in person, we shouldn't be throwing this out once emergency orders are lifted. We should still have this ability should the need arise. So. Okay, if there aren't any, then any others? Were there any other communications that council wanted pulled from the list? The only one I had, and I believe that probably we've already shared this information, is the first one with regards to the Middlesex Young Entrepreneurs Contest. And it's a contest in partnership with Invest in Middlesex and the Middlesex Workforce Development Partnership. And if we can certainly share that, and I would encourage council to share that with any budding young entrepreneurs that might be interested in this contest. They essentially have a business idea, they pitch a business plan and go from there, and then get some support in executing that plan. So if we could do some work on that, that was the only one I had. Okay, moving on to committee reports, CEDC.
Good evening. Okay, so you have a report in front of you. I just kind of, sorry if I had to bring it up on my phone.
Do you
here.
want it? Okay.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
What?
I get confused between the CEDC and economic development.
Yeah,
So,
I think that we probably that agenda items kind of overlaps each other now. So so I guess this I'll just go on to the report. Kathy, is that okay? Madam
sure.
Mayor?
Yep.
Okay. So a report I provided mostly on EDC stuff. The first one I want to bring forward is the RED application program, the grant. We need to, that proposal was submitted. So we would need to match those funds, the 50% funds. And so in my report, I kind of outlined what that would entail, how much. And after talking with Catherine, we have some EDC reserves that have been building up over the years. So this might be a good opportunity to actually allocate those funds. There'll still be some left over, but so we can actually finalize this grant, and we can do the paperwork to get this money from OMAFRA. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that first item. What items we put in for a mural, a downtown art, or not downtown, but probably a Main Street artwork piece, and some more signage. So that was kind of the three things that were put in for approval. Anyone have any questions on that? I have a motion that was kind of included in our package.
Yeah, we can
for approval.
We can do that at the end with all
Okay.
the motions.
Yeah. Okay. As long as those issues. The other things are a couple of updates. The Bacon Fest update report from the 2020 event also being canceled, and kind of where our budget. We attached a report from the budget so everyone could see where we're at. Minimal expenses occurred. Thankfully, everything happened early enough in the year that we didn't really put out too much money. The deposit for the headliner was returned. And we were I'm suggesting that just be applied then back, hopefully, for 2021, because obviously we need to book now once again for next July 2021. The person we're thinking of is not as expensive as the Rec Clause, so then we would have some of those funds left over. Don't know if anyone has any questions on Bacon Fest. No, okay, good.
Just one question, please. Just so we were able to get the refund back from the Rec Clause because of the pandemic clause in the contract. And I guess, excuse me, moving forward, it's hard to say, you know, I mean, that could be a different discussion, how restrictions are going to be imposed on us. And I guess I would ask, I mean, who knows if it'll still be considered a pandemic a year from now, or whether we'll be living with restrictions. But if there can be consideration put into the wording of that contract, should we have to make changes again next year?
Okay, we'll have to, yeah, it's the same wording. This is a different agency, but it's actually, they use the same wording every single different agency I've used. So we'd have to kind of think that over then, and maybe do how we would require that then deposit to be refunded, and
maybe some confirmation or clarification on their end, that if we're living in an environment where large gatherings are still not being allowed, how does that affect the contract?
Okay, yep, fair enough. We can clarify that one for sure. Let me go back. So next EDC meeting is Monday night. Except Kara and Dirk are attending to talk about the community improvement plan for Luke and Badal. So we encourage council to, you know, attend that Zoom meeting. I haven't scheduled that quite yet. I'll probably send that out tomorrow. So I will send it to council if you would like to attend. It's like I said, eventually that's going to come to council. So it would be interesting for council to come and listen to the discussion from Kara and Dirk and see what it's all about, get a good background on it. We circulated the survey to committee members of council, and it was done by SurveyMonkey. So I'm just kind of slowly, they're starting to come in, the responses from that. And just gave an update on the Main Street program, what we spent so far. And yeah, I think that's it. And then like I said, my recommendation for council for the RED program is a motion for later.
Great. Any questions for Lisa on that? Okay. And just, I would, just to echo what she said, I would encourage you, if it fits your schedule, to participate in the discussion on Monday regarding CIPs. It's an important discussion for our community. And I think it will be one that, as we go through this pandemic, will become even more important. So if your schedule allows, I would ask you to participate in that. Before I move on, Tina, did I miss you wanting to say something?
I just wasn't sure, Kathy, if you wanted to do that standard verbal motion to accept the communication reports as information received.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did not. I had all my notes for all my motions in the planning end, and I missed that one. So I apologize. If we can go back, can I get a motion to accept the communications report for information? Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman, and all opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, Blue Water.
We have a meeting on Thursday, and then Ron sent out just before our meeting there started a resolution for tonight, which Ron can speak to. I think it's about delaying us getting involved and seeing how the process works. This is what Francis is recommending us do. Ron, go ahead.
Yep, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, the chief executive officer, I guess, of Blue Water Recycling, Francis, is scheduled to attend our July 14th meeting. But in the interim, he and I were talking about what we can do, or what we can do as a community, as a municipality to support Blue Water. And he suggested that we should have another look and consider passing the motion that I mailed out. And with your permission, Madam Mayor, I'm just going to bring that motion up on the screen if I may. There we go. Can everybody see that? So just to reiterate, the motion is really to support, number one, the Blue Water Recycling method, and the fact that this is a very well-run organization. It works like a co-op, and it allows us to have one truck to go down our roads and pick up not only the recycling, but also the garbage. So you've got one vehicle going down that road. We've been a member for, since prior to amalgamation. So I'm going to say we're probably 25 years, if not more. And it's worked very much in our favor. We do not get a whole lot of complaints about anything being left at the side of the road. Blue Water Recycling people do a great job. They're very up to date with their equipment, with their processes. And so this motion really speaks to our support for them. And then it also speaks to about making the transition over to this new system and making that transition on April the 1st, 2024. That would allow us a little more lead time. We won't be one of the first ones. So hopefully all the sort of hiccups to the new system will be out of the way at that point in time. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be lots of work and lots of comments and changes between now and that date. But I think this gives a bit of direction to the province of where Luc and Biddulph stands in relation to this new change. So I would ask that the Mayor and Council consider this supporting this motion. Thank you.
So with that one, I don't have a hard copy, but I guess, did anybody have any questions on that resolution before maybe I open it up for a verbal motion? And since it's being shared, it is a bit to understand. When did they need this for again, Ron? When did they want?
Sorry, good point, Madam Mayor. The motions need to be submitted by the end of the month, and that's why it kind of came today as opposed to, otherwise I would have put it in the package for July 14th, but that would be too late to submit this to the province.
Okay. Okay. Dave, did you have anything to add to that? I guess, I mean, you've talked about this in the past, and we've certainly had presentations at conferences with regards to it. Certainly, I'm in support of it, but I wonder if there's any. Did you have anything to add to it first of all?
There's no reason to be caution. I think on approving this. We want to see if, I think, the potential rollout, there's no sense of being first out the gate, that we've got a good thing going for our community. We've got a good thing going for our area. We've got a large dollar investment that we should also be very, concerned about. So I think this speaks to all that. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So with that, if council's okay with that, then I would entertain a motion to make that resolution. I won't read the whole thing.
I'll make that motion.
Involved. So that would be made by the deputy mayor. And then Ron, did you want to go back to full screen for me?
Yep.
Unless, yeah, I mean, well, you've got the email. Everybody's got the email.
There we go.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor has made a motion to pass the resolution. It's been seconded by Councillor Regan. Are there any questions on that for either Ron or Dave? Then I'll ask the question, all opposed to that? And that's carried. Okay, thanks very much. And did you have anything else, Dave?
No.
Okay, moving on. Lake Huron. We did have a meeting last week. I think it was last week. Or the week before. And it was actually very standard meeting. It was mostly consent reports that we accepted. There was one report that was up for discussion, and that was with regards to a master water plan. It's been something that the staff at the Lake Huron Water Supply System has been working on for some time, and essentially it's their official plan for how they're going to deal with water over the next number of years. It looks at all. It's essentially also an asset management plan. Looks at all of the different stations that they've got throughout the system. What is going to be needed to be updated? What will work with growth and that sort of thing. So that was really the only thing up for discussion. The one interesting report, which I always find very interesting, is that they did have another distressed pipe that they had to repair. And you can go on to their website. You can see pictures of it or through their social media. And for those that have been on council for a couple of terms, they'll know that this is a project that I had brought back. The first year I was on the Lake Huron Water Board, there was a break near Mount Carmel, and it was quite substantial. And then there was another one. And so what we invested in was a fiber optic system, which essentially put fiber optics down in the pipe, and it's a pinging system. And then they can determine where there's a weakness in the pipe. And hopefully then they can repair the pipe without having the break. And so that happened. And again, it's all sort of in that Mount Carmel, Corbett area. So not sure what the deal is with the pipe system there, but So that was just recently repaired, and those are always fascinating pictures to watch. So that was it for Lake Huron, unless anybody has any questions on that one. Okay, moving on to fire boards. There's not any. ABCA, Upper Thames.
Yes, so we have ABCA meeting on Thursday, and our Upper Thames is next week. There have been some developments though for gradual opening of different services and amenities. So I'm not going to read them all. There's like seasonal camping's been open for a few weeks. Trails, hiking, biking, that sort of thing has all been open, but they are moving towards, at Upper Thames at least, to opening up nightly camping at day use with washroom facilities, swimming at Wildwood, and that sort of thing. So just visit the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority website to get the details on what's available and what's open. Obviously, our first concern is public safety and the safety of our staff. So this is something that we're working on. Staff are really putting the extra effort in to make sure that our outside staff are protected and what have you. Asaba Bayfield is also working towards being able to open up our features and amenities so that people can come out and enjoy, and we can continue to provide those services and generate revenue as well. So these are all things that are happening slowly but carefully so that we can make sure that everybody remains safe. So that's it.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Alex on that? Is the trail at Morrison Dam open yet, Alex?
Yes, I believe it is. I'd have to double check, but again, if you go to the Asaba Bayfield page, all the details of what's open and what's not are there. I know that there's a number of emails going back and forth, and I'd have to refer back to them to determine whether that's the case, but I do believe it is open. So, but there are still some restrictions, like at Rock Glen, as far as what's available. I believe they're going to be opening up washrooms soon, so that's one of the big ones, because maintaining public safety in areas like that is the most difficult, I believe, because there's a lot of contact surfaces. So we want to make sure that we've covered our bases, got all the equipment in place, like hand sanitizer and staff to clean them and so on. So.
Great, thank you very much, Alex. Moving on, Parks and Rec. Any plan to meet at all, Paul?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say we were going to meet on Monday, but given Lisa's announcement, since we have few members of council on the committee, I want to coordinate it with her first before committing to that, because if it's important for them to be at the other one, we don't want to have any conflict. So I'll touch base with Lisa, but we will be doing a Zoom meeting. We just want to check in with members and hear what feedback they've had with COVID-19 in the area, and how we've been dealing with recreation, and kind of what's to come with some of the discussions we're going through right now.
Okay, great, thanks. Canada Day. We don't have a committee, which I've talked to Tina about maybe updating the agenda later. But Lisa, did you want to speak to a couple of the things you're working on?
Yeah, sure. We're just kind of doing a few things for Canada Day. Obviously, we can't do what we normally do, and fireworks and cake and hot dogs and bounce castles. So we're just going to do a few little things around town. We're probably going to put Canada flags back in our flower boxes like we did last year. We're going to do a mayor's challenge, a decorating challenge, have some gift certificates out for, businesses and homes to decorate. We'll put a flyer together for information just so people kind of know what's happening and where they can virtually celebrate as well. So obviously, the nation's capital is having some, virtual concerts and things, and they'll have fireworks that night. So we'll put in those links for people to celebrate in their own way. And hopefully that day will encourage people also to send us their pictures or videos of what they're doing, so we can have some little memory of our special Canada Day year. And obviously we're putting together, as Cass said earlier, a little video with people saying Happy Canada Day from businesses, politicians, residents, and then we have a few people who actually submitted themselves singing Canada, Oh Canada. So I'll compile this and we'll release this on Canada Day, and again, it'll be a unique memory for us to have forever on this year.
Okay. And I think Lisa mentioned it at the last council meeting that we did receive the Canada Day grant. So there should be some funds left over from that. So depending on, and we've got until March to spend it. So depending on how we're living in December, there might be opportunity to have a special Canada Day something and later on in the year as well. Okay, staff reports. Tina's got the HR reports, but maybe I'll start with Ron first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll just give a bit of a verbal update. So touch wood, everybody's healthy in the office, no issues there. So we continue to maintain our health and happiness. So the front door does remain closed to the general public. However, appointments are available. So if anybody does need something, if we can't help them in a virtual situation, we have made arrangements for people to come in and get what they need. So I would encourage the members of council and the members of the public that are watching this to, if you do need something, please feel free to call or email any one of us on staff, and we can certainly help you out. So we continue to have our regular ECG, the Emergency Control Group meetings on a bi-weekly basis. We have one scheduled for this Friday. We will be talking about what has changed with the province moving to phase 2, sort of what does that mean for us in Lucan Biddulph. We continue to see a pretty healthy interest in our industrial park, in our residential development, and in our commercial development as well. So that's keeping us very busy in the office here, and we hope to have some good news for you, members of council, very shortly. So with that, that's all I had. If you want to jump to the deputy mayor, or to the deputy clerk, unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions for Ron? Okay, Tina.
So before you tonight, there are 2 policies that were previously brought forward at the February 18th meeting. The employee code of conduct was brought forward at that time, but it was decided to hold off on adopting it until some revisions to the respect and workplace policy were implemented. Because of the COVID pandemic, this kind of got put on hold a little bit, so I apologize. But it was reviewed with Cindy McNair, and she did suggest simplifying the reporting procedure within the respect and workplace policy. So I did email out to council the previous policy and showed the highlighted additions and the material that was being removed and edited as per discussions with Cindy. So if anyone has any questions regarding that, they can let me know. But at this time, we are looking to bring both those policies forward for approval and adoption.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor. I did have one question, Tina, just about at the very end, when I read through this. So I always like reading through these because I used to write them for a living. There's a form that somebody has to fill out, I think, right?
Correct.
Sorry, hang on. Sorry, say that again, sorry.
Correct, yes. There is a respect complaint form attached to the respect and workplace policy. And based on the way the policy is worded, that form would either be submitted by someone that is submitting a complaint, or if they go and they were to discuss with their supervisor would also at that time fill out this form.
All right, I guess just a second question, Madam Mayor, if I may. I just said, who devised that? Where did that come from? I haven't seen this one before, so I was just wondering if it was new. It just seemed kind of brief. Is really all I was going to ask.
The complaint form itself was part of our previous policy. And I believe the previous policy was something that was a broad policy that was brought through maybe under the OHSA Act. And most municipalities have used that standard policy in that form. And what I was working off of was our old policy, as well as Middlesex Center had brought forward some updates to it in December of 2019. And it was this exact form and policy that we did use as a precedent.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Tina.
Any other questions? Councillor Mastarakis.
Oh, thanks for all the work. Good on the respect and workplace. From the questions of the last meeting on the code of conduct, there's the similar, we're talking about maybe a whistleblower policy, and if that comes attached to some of the code of conducts now, and similar if it's a direct report of the CAO, or if the CAO, any code of conduct violations go to the CAO, there's no route, I don't think, on the code of conduct.
Code of conduct. I know, well, I don't know, Tina, did you want to speak to that?
To my understanding, if there was an allegation, it would be brought forward through the respect and workplace harassment and violence policy.
And
I think, to my understanding anyway, that the two of them kind of work together.
Oh, okay, and that's why they're bundled like that. Okay. Okay, yeah, if that's the case.
Yeah.
And the only thought is that if there's in many cases now, there's whistleblower policies, unless that's attached to somehow worked into the respect and workplace, but there's, that could be an add-on policy to this at some point. So we can keep moving ahead with this, then look at talking to Cindy and seeing if that's an add-on in some cases to a whistleblower policy.
Okay. Through you, Madam Mayor, it wasn't something that Cindy had brought up in review of these policies, but if you would like me to ask her or bring it back for an opinion, is that what you're directing?
That's my thought. If she would have an opinion on the whistleblower side, I've been seeing in a lot of organizations now where that is being added to either code of conduct or other policies. So,
okay.
But that we can go separate. We can move this forward and then potentially, so move this forward, get to the training, get to the stuff moving, and then maybe look at that as an add-on later.
So maybe that's something that when we as a working group get together, we can kind of chat about. I don't know if other municipalities have updated that, but that can be something that we do at the working group level.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. Did you have anything else, Tina?
I do not. Thank you. Actually, I will. You'll probably mention this at the end of the meeting, Kathy, but just a reminder that everyone will need to come into the office again to sign that decision tonight for the Finch and Simpson application.
Great.
Feel free to send a reminder email.
Okay.
Except for me, I'm off that list.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Finance, Catherine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have three things that I'd like to talk to you about tonight. The first one is regarding the report that is in the package regarding COVID-19 financial relief. Bringing this forward now because, as you can see in the background, a lot of the financial relief measures that we put in place are expiring at the end of this month. So you can see there a bit of a timeline based on what council's done during the state of emergency and the different financial relief measures put in place. An analysis of all these measures you can see laid out there. In conclusion of all that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of uptake or a need for these financial supports at this time. So given that situation, I'm not recommending to extend these financial reliefs past the June 30th date, but we can continue to monitor the situation, and you can always make decisions going forward if there's a need arises. And just a reminder again that if residents who are financially impacted because of COVID-19 are encouraged again to contact the Township Finance Department, and we are willing to work with them to make short-term arrangements during the pandemic. And then the note on the section we have to have in reports regarding the relation to the strategic plan. I said that it doesn't align with any specific action item, and it doesn't. I don't think in the strategic plan we plan for a pandemic. So, but this report is still necessary for your information and consideration. Any questions regarding this report?
If we had planned in our strategic plan for a pandemic, we could have been like fortune tellers. It could have been a whole new occupation for some of us. Okay, any questions for Catherine on that? Councillor Mastarakis.
Not a question, more a comment, if that's okay. I went back to the Parks and Rec Master Plan to look at the demographics and our average incomes, and a lot of the incomes we've got are a lot of trades that are higher incomes than other municipalities, and we have more of a moving to a seniors population. There's some professionals, so we may have greater sustainability of cash flows here from looking at that. So from trying to do an assessment of the market, we've got, I think we may have some, from what's happening currently in the trade areas and healthcare and so forth, I think we may have a better makeup in our community to help support what's happening for cash flows.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. I do think, and I mean, I've made this point with you, Councillor Mastarakis, like, and I would almost say to staff that it just be something that we kind of have right here to the back of our head and always watching and kind of reassessing as, you know, we're living in this pandemic, because I am fearful as we get out of this that perhaps maybe it'll be the fall and into the winter when we'll really see the effects of this. And you know, we may have to revisit this, but so that's all. But I would agree with what Councillor Mastarakis said. I think kind of in a good position at the moment, but just to be kind of keenly aware of how we go forward. Are there any other questions or comments for Catherine? Okay, is there a motion to go with Catherine's recommendation, or is it just a verbal? I think it's just a verbal. I don't have a written one. So,
Tina,
yes.
Go ahead, Tina.
I was looking at Ron, seeing if he was going to answer. There was no motion prepared, Kathy, because it was a recommendation that didn't change any decision.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the measures that are in place now are automatically set to expire at the end of June. So if you do nothing, it automatically expires. So,
okay.
You know, if you want, you can do a verbal motion to accept or receive her report if you'd like.
Report. Maybe that's what we should do, because then it just at least kind of closes that loop. So a motion to accept Catherine's report as presented. Can you get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Regan. And all opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And thanks for your work on that, Catherine, the last couple months. It's been great. Nothing else. We'll move on to Public Works.
No, I still have two more things.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I know in the interest of time, I'm sorry. If I may, may I speak to this?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We've kept you here for 3 hours. We should at least let you speak.
The other item that you have in the package is the tax rate bylaw for 2020 to to set the final 2020 taxes. There shouldn't be any surprises. It's just everything that was discussed and approved during the budget process back in March. So again, no change in the municipal portion of the tax rate, a 0% increase over last year, but includes the small increase to the garbage and recycling fees for 2020. Any questions on that?
Doesn't appear so.
Okay, and then the third item that came up, we're working on finalizing our 2019 financial audit. And there's a few items that we want to use the efficiency funds for in 2019. And I'll be bringing a formal report to our next council meeting outlining these. But I just wanted to give you a heads up as we finalize in case there's a huge pushback or indecision about what we use these funds for. Some of them are already part of the budget anyway. So I'll just briefly, so we had a couple of projects. So we got the Volta software, which was the online building permit stuff. And then we started the Laserfish project last year. And on the capital side, we had in Public Works a piece of equipment called the Viking attachment. So that was part of the capital budget process in 2018 to fund that equipment through the efficiency funds. And then the Granton Fire Hall had a new furnace and a water heater put in, and our share of that we wanted to use the efficiency funds for. That's to fund those. Those things I just talked about total about $20,000 out of our efficiency fund. We got over $400,000. So that's just what I'm proposing. I'll be bringing that in a formal report for your consideration in July. But as we finish the 2019, we want to have a direction on, or if there's any comments about that at this time, then we'll take those in consideration as we finish up.
Okay, any comments or questions on that? Okay, moving forward now on to Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. So I'm bringing forward a report on the pickup truck tender. I wish it was a simple report. It's a little bit, it certainly isn't simple. So we'll discuss it and I'll give you some insight on where we arrived at our recommendation. So this year we have a pickup truck, four-wheel drive, in the budget for the Public Works. We sent out 8 requests for quotes, as well as we posted on the website the quotation. We got 3 back. We got 2 GM products, one from Huron Motor Products, one from Finch dealership, and 1 Ford product from McDonald Ford from Strathroy. And during the when we did the quotes, the road supervisor came in and we went through the quotes. It was obvious the HMP quote was missing a lot of the requirements that were asked for in the quotation. So it really came down to 2 quotes, one from Finch for the GM product and one from McDonald Motors from a Ford product from Strathroy. So upon review, the road supervisor and myself, the Finch quotation is the only one that met all the requirements that were asked of it. The Ford, the big one that the Ford did not have was a power inverter that we could run our tools or run batteries, plug stuff into, that's built into the pickup truck. The other thing that the Finch quote stood out was that they're quoting a 2021 model. The McDonald Motors was a 2020. I called McDonald just to clarify that, and Ford is not building new trucks. Whether the plants have enough parts or whatever's going on, they're not switching over to the 2021 model till at least through the fall. So they will only quote a 2020 model not a 2021. So in discussions with the road supervisor, with the requirements that were in the Finch that were met, and that the fact that we would be getting a 2021 model rather than a 2020, we recommended to go with the 2021 model, even though it is the higher quoted quote by about almost $4,000, just under $4,000. So that's where the recommendation came from. You know, I can't say anything bad about the Ford truck. It just, when you look at all the requirements and you look at the recommendation from the road supervisor, he recommended the Finch one. So that's where we stand on that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Any questions on that one? Councillor Regan, Daniel.
I was just wondering, like, what were the requirements?
Oh, there's quite a, the requirements go everything from engine horsepower to box size, right down through, you know, we list everything out, windshield wipers, size of alternator, differential, locking differential. There would probably be close to 50 to 60 items that we require in the list. And the idea there is that the truck manufacturers can pick and choose what they put on. So unless you really outline what you want on this truck, they can hand you something that just doesn't, that can surprise you in the long run. So so that's where we get the list of requirements.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding the tender recommendation? Okay, anything else, Jeff?
An update. I'd like to go through a couple updates. The first one, paving is going to start on June the 25th or around June 25th on Corsi. We're going to send notices out to the local people in the area just to warn them that they're going to see construction crews out there in the next couple of weeks. I'm still in contact with Dillon Consulting and the county over the traffic lights. We're still looking for approval. Everybody keeps thinking it's going to be right around like any day they're going to approve it. Both Chris and Jason believe that we're still got a fall start on the project. It may drag through the winter, maybe like a 2-season project, but the plan is still to start in the fall and move ahead with that. Nagle water main is 90% in the main itself is 90% in the ground. We've done an excellent, got an excellent time putting everything in. We're on budget. Right now we're waiting for the road bore across Richmond Street. So until that subcontractor can come in and do the road bore, it basically a bit of things are just on hold there. But we knew that was going to happen. And we have communicated with the residents on a timeline, and the good news is we're right on budget where we thought we would be. So I'm feeling pretty happy about that. So that's the Nagle update. An update on the water staff. We've been having issues with some water usage in Granton, and so the water staff have been investigating water loss in Granton. And they have narrowed it down to a small section of town, and they're in the process of finding out where that water is leaking. Estimates is 20 to as high as 40% of the water usage in Granton may be leaking right now. So that's a high. I mean, in the grand scheme, it's not as high, but as for Granton area, that's a lot of water we're losing in Granton right now. So the water staff seems to have an idea where it is. They just got to narrow it down of exactly whereabouts in the water system it's leaking, and we'll get that taken care of. So we'll follow up with that. Just an update on the Lucan wastewater treatment plant. I think last meeting I talked about a repair. The UV system went down on us. We had to get that repaired immediately. We have that repair done. The system's back up and running. The only thing I wanted to make sure that the repair bill is going to be between $20,000 and $25,000 for that repair. So that's quite it's high. It had to be done. We're looking into hopefully having something put in so it will not happen again, because it was a power surge. It was a power surge, whether it was lightning or a power surge in the plant itself. So we're looking at how we can eliminate that from not happening again. So, but that was I consider remote. So, and that's all my updates for today.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Any questions or comments for Jeff? Daniel?
I'm just wondering, I'm going to ask before the deputy mayor does anything on the car wash.
No, just a straight no.
All right, great.
Any other questions for Jeff? Dave?
Just regarding the salt shed. So Jeff, are we pretty just fortunate of the deal we've had there, and realistically we need to get our heads around being independent, or am I mistaken in that?
No, I mean,
or is it a lot of towns have what we have going on?
I mean, it is nice to be the master of your own ship. There's no doubt about it. And then certainly we do not need, a real large storage area. So this is something that is certainly not out of our ability to put a small storage area in very easily. But at the same time, I think everybody sees such a large complex there that works so well that, we want efficiencies in government. This is the perfect example of a small little space at that shed where we can come and go. It just doesn't, it doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, from the common sense sort of things to see that. So
is it free?
No, we pay for certain things for it. So we pay for the use of the loader. We pay for the sand that we use. And there's a bit of a premium.
Rent, is there any rent?
There is no rent on the space itself, no.
So where I'm going with this, I mean, we look at the positioning of that building and talk about efficiencies, and if we were able to put something at the Public Works building, I mean, I got to assume, I mean, that's basic at the edge of our community where that is, and you're bringing your salt and sand and pulling it, as opposed to where a Public Works building is. I mean, certainly there'd be efficiencies there. I mean, if we're forced into this, is there not a case for part of the money to be pulled out of the efficiency funds, I guess is where I'm going with this.
Yeah, there definitely is an efficiency. There's also a bit of, we've also applied, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, we've actually, because there's a bit of growth here also. So we've actually, a part of this should be part of the DC charges. So that that growth should reflect in sand salt storage also. So there's a combination there, efficiencies and growth would come into it. So I think in the long run, I mean, it is nice to be the master of your own ship, like I said. There is savings to be had. I mean, we do pay a bit of a premium for the sand. We do pay a good little chunk for the loader. Every time one of our operators turn it on, it costs money. So there is some efficiencies there. And I think over time, we would probably, it certainly would be an investment that we get back. It's tough when you see such a good complex there and we use it so little. That's the hard part. So.
I mean, it's a long, hard to get your head around payback, but God, the efficiencies from your guys pulling in, getting out of their truck, getting in a truck and getting their salt and sand on site, as opposed to driving to really the boundary of the furthest point in our community almost. I don't know. I can kind of get my head around if we're being pushed to this independence. I mean, it's anyways. Okay.
You're definitely right. And it comes down to, sometimes, and people don't realize, you don't want to leave a load on overnight because it wears on the springs. And so it's easy to dump off at your own yard. Whereas a lot of the times we leave the loads on for sometimes weeks at a time, just because we don't want to take it back and dump. Because again, every time we use the loader, we get charged, you know, and that sort of thing. So there's definitely some value in having a storage right next to the shop. There's no doubt about it. You know, so anyways.
Yep. All right. Just thinking of an avenue too for you for again spreading out the costs or for efficiency, because I think the miles and the kilometers and man hours would they be there, but no, thanks, Jeff.
Councillor Mastarakis.
Question through you, Madam Mayor. Jeff, is there an option, would county benefit as they're going up and down our roads in the winter? Is there an option to partner with other municipalities? Has another municipality been kicked out or of this process as well? Is there benefits there or opportunities?
Well, and through the mayor, I think that's a great look. The only thing is, I would suggest before we, you know, to talk to the county is sure that would be the first number one thing to do there. But I caution a little bit. And the only reason I caution a little bit is we use such a very small amount that if we have to say join up and we build a complex or we combine with something that's in our area, we open our door to a lot more environmental rules, regulations. You start adding on costs to build those large complexes, where if we kept it very small, very straightforward for ourselves, there's savings in that. Like I said to Ron, I said, we don't use enough salt to even process a salt management plan at this point. Whereas if we combined and we went with another, say the county, we'd have to look at a salt management plan and that sort of thing. So, but at the same time, I think it would be foolish not to inquire to the county, because I think they're going to do some investment in Bryanston. With the Wayland line online, they're looking at some more supply up in this area. So I think it's only prudent to open that conversation and see where it's going. But I think we just got to be cautious about it. So.
Okay. Is that good, Peter? No follow-up? Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jeff? Okay. That's it on your end. You're done?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Paul, Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have 3 quick verbal updates. Tomorrow I'll be attending a Return to Hockey Framework. It's hosted by the Ontario Recreational Facilities Association and the Ontario Hockey Federation. During that conversation, we're going to be discussing what hockey may look like in the fall. Should we be allowed to open and have team sports? We've also been going over this framework with staff to view their opinions on how we could safely operate and manage, as well as just to keep them aware. It's going to be a constructive conversation, I'm sure, and I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to hearing it. I know our Minor Hockey Association, I've already discussed with their president that this is going on. They've all been made aware that this is going on. I've also reached out to the Junior Cs. I've let them been aware of the conversation that's going to be happening, and hopefully something positive is going to come out of this. Everything's slowly shaping up. We're seeing many examples across the country on how people can operate. So I think that's the most important part. As well, Abby and myself have been working hard with the health unit to try and come up with some sort of programming we may be able to offer to the community through maybe outdoor spaces. It's very difficult, obviously, but the health unit has been pretty positive about our approach with them to work with them on this. There's a lot of ideas coming forward from the Ministry of Heritage, Sports, Tourism, and Culture. We're approaching those ideas and we're looking at them to see what we can offer. I think the conversation that when we get to that point, we'll have to discuss, do we want to try and have fees for these programs? Do we want to just provide the residents with a service? I know it was in previous conversations, it was been discussed that, we're creative. I'm sure we'll come up with something for people to do. So we're trying our best. We're putting it out there and see how we can safely manage these things. With that, as we announced earlier, this Friday, I guess now, the splash pad is now open. We tried to clearly communicate to residents what amenities are open and what they can do. And once again, just thank you to the residents for being patient with us. I think in our community, we've been very fortunate. We haven't had any of the difficult situations that others have. Our residents are being very respectful, and I appreciate it very much. And same thing as you had said earlier, Madam Mayor, just when these announcements do come forward, it takes time and effort to put these in place properly to make it safe. So thank you once again for your patience, everyone, for allowing us to take the time to open up safely and properly. And also getting the message across, I think, is key. So it's very important that we keep going that way. And then we'll have everything back to normal and operating safely, and you can all enjoy it again. And then finally, I just want to say, last Wednesday, we had a very fitting send off to our former employee, Norm Goldie. And I'm very thankful to the family for allowing us to be part of that. I know Dick Jurgens, who is a longtime employee who worked with Norm for a long time, got to give him a final send off. And I think it meant a lot. And I think we're really thankful to the family for allowing us to do that for Norm.
Yeah, well said, Paul. You're gonna make me cry. If you haven't had a chance to watch Norm's service, then I would encourage you to go back and watch it through Hasket's website. They live streamed it, and it was a really nice service, and it was neat to have the Olympia out there waiting for Norm and have Dick drive it, and yeah, I think it was pretty special. So I'm glad that you guys were able to pull that off, and that Bonnie and the family were open to that. So that was good. Any questions for Paul? Okay, moving on. Councillor comments. Councillor Regan.
Hi, I know it's late, so I'll be very brief. So I was going to mention this last meeting about a month ago. I was at a roundtable discussion hosted by the warden of Middlesex County. And we got to listen to 3 of the ministers. And I was just, one of them, Mr. Clark, had mentioned about at the end of this pandemic, some of the things that we've been trying are probably going to stay with us. And he talked about things like creativity, innovation, collaboration. And it got me sort of thinking that through all of this, and it's something that maybe we should pat ourselves on the back about, is that we've had all of these things with our staff and our council, I think, if I'm allowed to say that. So I just just kind of proud to be part of that. Staff have worked very hard. We've been very innovative. Council, I think, has been pretty progressive in this time and just kind of holding things together. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for doing that. The other thing too, speaking of local business, Lisa, I just thought I'd mention, on Thursday, I have an appointment with Amber at the Beauty House, and I'm getting my hair cut. That's all I got.
Yeah, I know. Happy days, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all.
If I may, Madam Mayor, just to comment on what Councillor Regan had said, I know it's been a common subject of conversation throughout all our meetings that having this Zoom technology and communicating with across the county to try and be on board has been super beneficial to operating through this crisis. And I think it's not just countywide, it's provincially wide. We're getting a lot more connected, and I think operating this way it's been fantastic. It's been a learning experience for me, as well as I know a lot of other communities. So I think it's a very useful tool, and I hope we really continue this connection when we get through this.
Yep, I think that that is not the first time that comment has been made across councils across the province. I think at first it was probably a little bit, scary, but I think we've all worked into a great routine, and there are incredible benefits to being able to meet like this. And, you know, we've discussed them before, and yeah, I think using it to our benefit is great. And thanks for those comments, Daniel. You're absolutely right. Staff has worked really hard to make it look like it's business as usual and seamless, and you know, a lot of credit needs to be given. Any other comments from councillors? The only one I have, and I just got the email tonight, otherwise I would have included it in my opening statements talking about good news stories. But last week, in partnership with the Lions Club, we had a community food drive that we hit Granton and Clandeboye and Lucan, and it was a great turnout, and we had representation from councillors, and I want to thank everybody that participated. It went by really quickly. We got the, as I say, Granton done, we got Lucan done, and Clandeboye. And I found out from the food bank tonight that our haul that evening was 2,655.7 pounds. So congratulations to everybody that was involved in that. It certainly was a threatening night, that you thought at any moment that, you know, it was going to break open, but we were able to miss that. And, you know, it was great to have the Lions Club spearhead that. And we were happy to be involved with the contactless food drive. So congratulations to all that were involved. Okay, so if there aren't any more comments, no changes to budget, any notices of motion? Okay, so we will move on to our motions then. And just before we close off, I just want to remind council, if they can stay on, we won't end the meeting, we'll end the recording, but if council can stay on so that Lisa can take our little video of us all participating for Canada Day, okay? All right, we'll move on to motions. That the Council of the Township of Lucan-Biddulph adopt the following HR policies. Policy number 101-01-2020, respect in workplace, harassment and violence. Policy number 101-02-2020, the Employee Code of Conduct. And further, that the Council of the Township of Lucan-Biddulph repeals the following policy. Policy number 100-36-2010, respect in workplace. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. And all opposed. And that is carried.
Sorry, Kathy, to interrupt. I just want to make sure you don't miss the accounts paid motion. It was separate. Oh, you know what? I probably didn't print it.
Okay, that's okay, because
that would be my fault.
I can still do the motion, and then you can just print it and I can sign it.
Yes.
After. Okay. So you've got it on your agenda, the accounts paid. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan-Biddulph receive the attached accounts as paid for information as follows. May 2020 for $346,537.60. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. Any discussion? All opposed? And that's carried. Okay. Resolved that the council direct staff to formalize the Red Grant application and allocate $8,584.50 from the CEDC reserves. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Mastarakis. And Councillor Regan. And all opposed. And that is carried. Thank you. Resolved that the council direct staff to proceed with the purchase of a 2021 Chevrolet Silverado from French Chevrolet in the amount of $36,478 plus HST. And a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Mastarakis. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 27-2020, the tax rate bylaw, 203-2020, the zoning bylaw amendment for Finch, and 28-2020, the confirming bylaw. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Reagan and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that is carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:51 p.m. A mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Westman. And all opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much.